Before She Dies by Mary Burton. Narrated by Johanna Parker. Copyright 2012 by Mary Burton. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with Kensington Publishing Corporation and was produced in the year 2012 by Tantor Media Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Prologue. 18 years ago. He could pinpoint the day, the hour, even the second when he'd chosen his first kill. In that sacred moment, fear, rules, and consequences ceased to matter, and long-nurtured fantasies elbowed aside judgment. The switch had been flipped, and a line would be crossed. He raised his gaze to the blindfolded young girl tethered to the wooden chair. She was slumped forward, unconscious from the drugs he'd administered. A curtain of lush dark hair covered her pale oval face, cascaded over tight, full breasts, and grazed a full waist and gently rounded hips. Not more than 17 or 18, the girl worked at the carnival. She was the psychic, the seer, the seducer. For the average person, she was a delightful diversion or a harmless amusement, but he was a rare breed, empowered with gifts that allowed him to see beyond her youth and beauty to the timeless evil. The decision to kill her had come 7 days ago when he'd visited her carnival tent. On that night, he'd patiently waited in the line that trailed outside her tent. He'd been nervous, edgy, and still clueless that his life was about to change. When he'd finally entered her domain, candles flickered in shadowed corners, soft music drained from unseen speakers, and the heavy scent of incense clung to the air. She'd been sitting behind a gilded desk and had worn a bright red flowing gypsy costume. A dark wig framed a lovely face, half hidden by a black domino mask. He'd felt the rush of excitement as he'd stared at her and sat across the table from her. "Madame Divine," he'd said. Nodding, she turned his hand over and exposed his palm. "Yes. You look so young." "Do not be fooled by my youth." Confidence dripped from each word as she traced his jagged lifeline. He wasn't deceived. "I saw the line. You are quite popular." Green eyes bore into him. "What is your question?" Her abruptness stoked his anger, but he was careful to keep it checked. "Did she love me?" Nodding, Madame Divine traced another line on his palm. "I can answer that question for $20. His skin tingled as he pulled his hand free, dug a rumpled $20 bill from his jeans pocket, and laid it on the velvet-draped table. She set the timer at her side before she again cradled his hand. Her skin was soft and warm. Sweet, subtle perfume drifted around her and mingled with the heavy stench of scented candles. She closed her eyes and asked the spirits for guidance. As he stared at the delicate frown that creased her forehead, he imagined what it would be like to strip the clothes from her body and beat her until she wept. How would her voice sound when she begged? He imagined she'd beg, cry, and plead. And when he wrapped his fingers around her neck, how long would it take for the life and warmth to drain from her body? He wondered all these things as she traced the lifeline on his palm and spoke of prosperity and good fortune. And then suddenly she straightened as if she'd been kicked by the devil. Tension rippled through her fingers and her breathing grew shallow. She released his hand as if it had burned her flesh. She stared at him, fear glimmering in the green depths. In this panicked moment, he knew that she saw his true intent. The realization rattled him. No one had ever seen beyond his veneer. She was a true seer, a witch. She was the one that God wanted him to kill. "Are you okay?" he said. Yes, I'm fine." She moistened her lips. "Tell me about this woman you love." He smiled, knowing he could be charming when it suited him. "We met at the university. We're in the same class." "What's her name?" "Carrie. I loved her very much. Why didn't she love me back?" The predictable question coaxed some of the tension from her shoulders, and she eased forward a fraction. She smiled, but he knew her fear, as visible as the sweat on her brow, lingered. "Carrie loves you, but she's afraid of her emotions." Despite his resolve to be strong, her soft voice speaking Carrie's name drew him in closer. He wanted to believe Carrie had loved him. "She said she hated me." "She doesn't hate you. She loves you. You must go to her and tell her that you care." She spouted more nonsense about good fortunes and happiness, but when the timer buzzed, she immediately released his hand. His open palm lingered. He yearned for her touch. Emotions demanded he take her now. Kill, kill, kill. But logic kept him on a tight leash. Wait, prepare. And so he quietly left the tent and used the next week to prepare his room for her. She was his first kill, and he wanted the details to be perfect. On the 7th night after his reading, he'd waited in the shadows. When she returned from her whoring in town and ventured to the carnival bathroom by the wood's edge, he grabbed her and covered her mouth with his gloved hand. An injection in her arm had immediately rendered her silent and compliant. He easily dumped her in the trunk of his car and brought her to this hunter's cabin, nestled in the hollow of the Virginia woods. Now, moonlight streamed through the small windows and mingled with the glow of 3 lanterns. The only concession to luxury in the rough cabin was a water pump, which fed into a deep basin. Furnishings were limited to a long wooden table and a few straight-back chairs by an old soot-stained hearth. Those who inhabited this place were prepared for a monk's life, an idea that appealed to him. Eagerness churned inside him. Too many years of fantasizing and dreaming were about to become reality, and it was hard to maintain control. His skin tingled, his stomach clenched. If he didn't soon unleash the raw energy brimming inside him, he'd go insane. Unable to wait for her to awaken, he grabbed a bucket of cold water and poured it on her face. She awoke, cussing, screaming, and sputtering. The hint of panic behind her screams enhanced his excitement. He stared at her silk blouse, now wet and plastered to full breasts. Breathless, his own muscles aching with want, he retreated to the cabin's corner and sat down. He'd not expected so much desire. He'd always considered himself a chaste and prudent man, but she made him crave dark, evil passions. Anticipation burned through his body, and he knew if he didn't rein in his desires, he'd break his covenant with God. She must confess and be purified first. As she coughed, he muttered a prayer for patience. Retrieving the small Bible from his pocket, he gently kissed the gold cross embossed into the well-worn black leather. The Bible had been a gift from his mother on his 10th birthday. Though not fancy or substantial in size, the book provided him with answers, insights, and in times of stress, it was a guiding force. With trembling fingers, he flipped through the pages, scanning and rereading passages. As he focused on the words, he suddenly felt her gaze through the blindfold. Her head was tipped back and cocked in his direction. Water dripped from her hair and face over a gold chain and down between the cleavage of her breasts. Tied up, cold and wet, she should have been contrite and scared, but instead she possessed a dark, brooding bearing that unsettled him. He didn't like her absence of fear. "Don't stare at me," he said. She shook her head. "I'm blindfolded. I can't see anything." "You are looking at me." "So what if I am?" Her voice was rusty, seductive. "You are Satan's child." She actually smiled. "So I've been told." Fury scraped at his nerves. He crossed the room and grabbed a fistful of her hair. He pulled a knife from his back pocket and pressed it to her neck so she could feel the sharp tip. Her jugular pulsed under the blade. He was a half-second from slicing her throat when reason shoved its way to the front of his mind. "I need you to confess your sins to God so you can be released from this earth clean and pure." A defiant set to her jaw said as much as her words. "The clean and pure days are long gone for me." The girl's tone resonated a lifetime of experience. "I need your confession. I need to send you to God pure." "Then I guess it's your bad day." She cocked her head. This close, he could smell the hint of a spicy, no longer sweet, perfume mingling with the stale scent of the threadbare gypsy costume. He turned her face roughly to the side so the lantern light caught the high slash of cheekbones. She was pretty, but she possessed a callous aura that would grow more insensitive with time. By 30, she'd be washed up and spent. Why'd she seemed so different a week ago? "It's just you and me, baby," she whispered. "Why don't we play instead of fight? Some boys like to play rough, but I promise gentle is better." The grip in her hair tightened. "Don't call me baby." She reminded him of a cat toying with a mouse. "Why not? I'm good, and you'll like what I can do for you." Tempted by her honeyed words, he dropped his gaze to her breasts, so round and full. He ached to touch and suckle them. The balance of power was shifting. "Shut up." "Be my baby, and then I promise you'll forget all about the whip in this cabin." He pulled her hair until she cried out, "Whore! Harlot!" Tears of pain, not fear, ran down under the blindfold's creases over her cheeks. "Baby, just take me. You know I'll be good. I'm always good." She had enough range of motion in her bound hand to brush his jean-clad thigh with her fingertips. The faint touch sent an explosion of sensation through him, and immediately he grew hard. Honeyed words, as sweet as a siren's call, tested his resolve and summoned him to temptation's edge. Though he was the one with power over life and death, she'd somehow mesmerized him with her soul-stealing eyes and a simple touch. "You don't have to hurt me, baby," she said. "We can be good together. Untie me and you'll see." "Do you think I'm stupid?" "No." Her supple lips belied the word. "But we better get busy before someone catches us." It was his turn to smile. "No one is going to bust in on us. Only a handful know about this cabin, and those that do wouldn't bother with a visit until deer season." He stroked her hair. "And that is still weeks away." She moistened cracked, dried lips, and this time a faint tremor rippled under her words. "Kiss me. I know you want to kiss me." And God help him, but he did. He'd dreamed about taking her since he'd first seen her 7 nights ago. It had taken repeated razor cuts to his thighs and belly to keep himself chaste and controlled until the right moment. He leaned forward and tasted her rosy lips. They were soft, salty, and before he thought, he greedily cupped her full breast in his smooth palm. He squeezed her nipple until she whimpered. He grew harder and fantasized about releasing her bindings and taking her. Perhaps he could keep her a few weeks in the special box under the floorboards where he hid his toys. There she'd be safe, secured, and always at the ready to play. Maybe given more time, this Delilah could be cleansed and sent to God pure and clean. And then in the distance he heard the voice, summoning him back to his path. "She is a witch. She will steal your soul if you give yourself to the temptations of the flesh." He jerked back and stepped away from her. He swiped his mouth with the back of his hand. She must have sensed his panic because her smile radiated arrogance. "It's okay, baby. You can love me. Let me free, and I'll show you what real fun can be." He'd dreamed and fantasized about killing. He'd chosen his victim. He'd planned. And now, when he should follow through, he was faltering. What was wrong with him? He backed away from her, snatched up his Bible, muttered random prayers, and reminded himself that he was a soldier of God. "I am not weak. I am stronger than your temptations." She moistened cracked, dried lips. "Let me love you, baby. Let me love you. You don't even have to take the blindfold off." He set down the Bible. "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Scorn pulsed from her. "I love you, baby. I just need you to unchain me so I can show you." "You are a sinner. You need to confess." His voice, roughened by desire, was unrecognizable. "I have nothing to confess." "We are all sinners, baby." She moistened her lips and shifted her body so her breasts gently bounced. His erection throbbed. He pressed his hands to the fresh cuts he'd made to his chest that morning. Pain seared his senses, and for a moment he struggled with his breath as the desire leaked from his body. "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." The words from Exodus rolled off his tongue again and again, half statement and half prayer. He'd been born to destroy the wicked, not be drawn in by their earthly temptations. His own blood dampened the front of his white shirt and his hands now. In the moonlight, the blood had darkened from red to black. He smeared it on the woman's forehead, mingling his blood with her own. The scent and smell of their blood was sweet indeed. He turned and moved to the pump and bucket in the corner. He cranked the pump's lever until the water spat out and then flowed free. She turned her head toward the water. "What are you doing, baby?" He filled the bucket and transported it to a long metal tub near the woman. He repeated this process until the tub was full and brimming with water. With fumbling fingers, he untied her wrists. "It's time to play." "Good," she said. "You'll be glad. We'll be good together." Hefting her slight form, he carried her toward the tub and forced her to her knees. He grabbed a shock of her hair and dangled her face above the water's rippling surface. "What are you doing?" Bravado could no longer hide her terror. "Confess and be free of your sins." "Confess what?" He shoved her face into the cold water, savoring the way her body flailed and squirmed. Only when he saw bubbles rise to the surface did he draw her head back. She coughed and sputtered and gripped the edge of the tub with trembling fingers. "Are you ready to confess?" Wet strands of black hair draped her face and hid her expression as she coughed, sputtered, and tried to pull free. She screamed. The sound ricocheted off the log walls and swirled in the air above his head. "No one can hear." Her cry slowed and stopped. "Why are you doing this? I've done nothing wrong." He shoved her face so close to the water's edge the tip of her nose touched it. "You know why, witch." She yanked at her bindings and shook her head. "Why do you keep calling me a witch? I'm not a witch." He shoved her face in the water, counted to 30, and then lifted it. She coughed and gagged. "I saw you coming out of the sorceress's tent tonight at the carnival. You held my hand a week ago and spouted your evil." She jerked her head and tried to break his hold. "We're just stupid carnies. The fortune-telling is for fun." "You read palms. You do the devil's work." Her black, thick hair clung to her face like a spider's web. "You know it's all bullshit. None of that stuff is real. It's all a show, an act." He loomed over her. "You were right about too many things." "I'm good at the game, one of the best, but there's no magic." She shook her head. "People pay us a few bucks, and we tell you a little bit about yourself. No magic. It's bullshit." This time he held her face underwater for the count of 45. "Liar. Heretic." She gagged and rolled her head to the side, frantically coughing and expelling the water from her mouth and lungs. "You want me," she said. "I feel it. Let me make you feel better." "I don't want you anymore." "You do!" Bitterness tangled around the words. Defiance still lingered in her rusty voice as her face loomed over the water's edge. It made sense that she would be strong. She'd been raised among the carnival people, traveling demons that moved from town to town. This time, when he shoved her head under the water, he held it there until her body stopped flaying and went limp. When all the fight had leached from her body, he jerked her free and turned her on her side to allow the water to drain free. He checked her pulse, and when he felt that it had stopped, he panicked. "She needs to confess." He tipped her head back and started mouth to mouth. After several chest compressions, she inhaled sharply and her eyes opened wide. She vomited water from her lungs. He ripped off her blindfold. He wanted to see her eyes. He wanted her to see his face. When she looked at him, recognition and shock glistened. "Christ, man, why are you doing this to me? I thought you liked me." Contrition. It was the first step toward salvation. "Why are you doing this to me? Please." Her voice sounded hoarse and raw. He leaned forward and brushed the wet hair off her face. Her skin felt cold, clammy. "What are you sorry for?" Vibrant blue eyes bore into him. "Whatever I did, I'm sorry. Just don't punish me anymore." Again, her gaze caught him off guard. It lured him in as it had before and made him want to forget about crusades and righteousness. He simply wanted to sink inside her warmth. As he dreamed of so many times, he kissed her gently on the lips and smoothed hair from her eyes. If you don't know what you did, then how can you be sorry? Renewed panic replaced the silent pleas. You called me a witch! He'd never deny that she was a smart, clever girl. I did. She licked her lips. You're not the first. Other men have said I bewitched them. He traced his hand over her flat belly. The idea of other men staring and leering at her troubled him. She was his, and his alone. So you admit you are a witch, a sorceress, a stealer of souls? I wouldn't be driven to this if it weren't for your magic. Her gaze remained locked on his as she laid her hand on his. Yes, I'm a witch, and whatever else you said. He tightened his fingers on her breast and squeezed. She winced but continued to smile. This one understood the powers of her body and how best to wield them. And you repent? You swear that you are evil? Yes. For a moment he laid his head between her breasts and listened to the rapid thump-thump of her heart. Praise be. Let me go, she said. I won't tell. I won't. And I can still make you feel real good. I swear. He closed his eyes. After what I just did to you, you still want me? Yes, I want you. Just us, baby. No one else. He still longed to suckle her breasts and shove inside her softness. As he lifted his eyes and prayed for strength, his gaze settled on the cracked mortar sandwiched between the logs of the cabin's wall. He likened the cracks to his own soul. Flawed and damaged, they were still strong enough to carry the burden. With trembling fingers, he combed her hair back. She stared up at him, vulnerable, scared, and ready. Before he could surrender to temptation, he shoved her head under the water. She fought him, straining and twisting her body as her fists flailed. She tried to kick him with her feet, but he used his weight to render her immobile. Slowly, he counted away the seconds until her struggles lessened and she stopped fighting. Bubbles gurgled to the surface, and still he held her face firmly under the water until the 3-minute mark. This time when he released her, her body slumped to the dirty floor, pale, cold, and dead. Go with God, Grace. Mariah! Grace Wells screamed her sister's name even before she was fully awake. She sat up in her twin daybed, searching the dark as she grabbed her throat. She struggled to breathe and to catch her breath. Slowly, she hauled in enough deep breaths to calm herself. She searched the dark room of her trailer for signs of her sister's return. Light seeped into the small window and illuminated the flowered coverlet, stuffed animals, and a poster of Brad Pitt in a scene from A River Runs Through It. She pulled at the frayed edges of her pink nightgown and struggled to calm herself. She'd endured endless nightmares since her mother had died 3 years ago, and for the most part she'd gotten used to waking up alone and terrified. But this night terror was different. She saw no faces and heard no sounds except for Mariah's cries for help. Grace pressed trembling fingers to her temples and stared out the window. The grassy fairgrounds were located on the outskirts of town. The ground had been soft when they'd arrived, and the carnival's trucks had left deep ruts in the ground and torn away large patches of grass. This field looked like so many other fairgrounds in cities she'd long forgotten. The carnival's Ferris wheel and flying scooter sat still and dark. The flaps to the rifle shot, ring toss, and basket jump shot games were closed, and the ticket booth's window was shuttered and locked. All normal. She crossed the room she shared with Mariah to the small crib and peeked in on the baby. The girl, Sooner, was just 5 days old and already looked so much like Mariah. The baby's deep, even breathing did little to ease Grace's fears. Grace should have been working tonight, but she'd not felt well, so Mariah had agreed to take the shift. Because the carnival would be closing in 4 days, they'd all anticipated big crowds. You owe me, kid. I know, thanks. Don't wait up for me. I've got a date. Mariah had met another boy, a prince this time, who was most valiant and who just might be the one. But the boys that lingered around the carnival weren't looking for lasting love. Theirs was a gypsy's life with no regular address, schools, or roots of any kind. Not for the first time this season, she longed to move on to the next stop, thinking that maybe it would be better. The room chilled with loss and grief. She hugged her arms around her chest. "Oh God, Mariah, what have you gotten yourself into this time?" Chapter 1. Present Day. Tuesday, October 19th, 5:15 a.m. She had a power over him. In this room, alone with her, words failed him. Here he followed her lead, moving with an economy of motion, undressing quickly and falling into bed before reason spoke. Their sex was always urgent, hot, and it left his heart punching against his ribs. This time, like every time before, she rose out of bed, his scent clinging to her, and dressed in silence. He knew what would follow. She'd manage a quick fix of her tousled auburn hair, they'd share obligatory, if not embarrassed, pleasantries, and she would leave, never suggesting that there should be a next time. However, this time when she rose, Daniel wasn't content to just let her leave. He rolled on his side and watched her trembling fingers smooth the bunched cream silk slip down over her naked hips. She moved to the mirror and inspected once well-applied makeup, now sinfully smudged, and pale skin, crimson with sex's afterglow. He wanted her back in bed, curled at his side, but he hesitated to ask. She'd been clear from the beginning that she'd only signed up for good, hot sex. She didn't want a lover or a boyfriend or anything that involved commitment. That first time, he'd agreed to her terms, counting his lucky stars and fully expecting little more than satisfaction and a pleasant memory. But from that initial release until now, he couldn't get enough of her. The more she gave, the more he wanted. And the lines she'd drawn between professional and personal had entirely faded, for him. Manicured fingers slid over the slip as she glanced at the clock on the nightstand, sighed, and collected her scattered clothes from the floor. He made no effort to hide his fascination with her. They'd shared this motel room 5 other times now, but he'd yet to see her fully naked. She had a long, sleek form, creamy skin, a narrow, tapered waist, and a nicely rounded bottom. He wasn't sure what she hid from him, but found the mystery more consuming each time they had sex. Last time, he'd seen the scar marring her side and thought he'd discovered her secret. When he'd asked her about it, she'd shrugged and said, "I was shot." Curious, he'd pulled the police file and read the details of the shooting. It had occurred 3 years ago. She'd been working late. A client's hitman had entered her office and shot her because she'd been considered a loose end. Bleeding and alone, she'd escaped to a bathroom and locked the door. The shooter, unable to reach her, had barricaded her inside and left her for dead. It would be another 8 hours before she would escape and call 911. The crime scene photos had stirred primal anger in him. Even now, he could vividly recall photo images of her blood staining the bathroom's carpeted floor, the door hinges she wedged free with the tip of her high heels, and her bloodied silk blouse left behind by emergency medical technicians. "Do you think about the shooting?" he'd said as he'd kissed the scar. She threaded her fingers through his hair. "No." "It's got to bother you." Her fingers stilled. "I never dwell on the past." If she weren't hiding the bullet hole scar, then why not take off the slip? Last night when he tried to tug it off her, she'd resisted. What else was there to hide? She slipped on her blouse and efficiently buttoned it. Sliding on a pencil-thin black skirt, she tucked in her shirt tail and with the flick of the zipper was again all elegance and class. Maybe some old lesson from charm school kept her from stripping totally. Thinking about that slip and what it hid gave him another hard-on. "Why don't you stay?" She found her panties and, facing him, tucked them in her purse. "We both have early calls." "You gave your final summation yesterday. The pressure's off until the jury comes back. Go into the office late today. You've earned it." She arched a neat eyebrow. "I've never been late before." He propped his head on his hand. "Be late." "Why?" "Once is not enough when it comes to you." She readjusted her pearl necklace so the diamond clasp was again in the back. A smile played with the corners of her lips. "I wish I could stay for an encore, really, but I've got appointments." "All work and no play makes Charlotte a dull girl, counselor." "All work keeps Charlotte liquid and her bills paid, detective." Naked, he rose off the bed and moved toward her until he was inches away. Towering, he fingered the pearls around her neck. She smelled of Chanel and him. "We should have dinner sometime." She grinned. "We just had dessert." "I'm talking about real food. Tables, chairs, forks, knives, and spoons." She didn't pull away. "I don't think so." "You've got to eat sometime." "We drew a line. It has to remain fixed and secure." He curled the pearls around his index finger. "The defense attorney doesn't want to be seen with a cop." "Maybe the cop shouldn't be seen with the older defense attorney." 3 years doesn't count as older, and I don't care who sees me with you." She untangled his finger from her pearls. "We are judged by the company we keep." The wistful, if not sad, edge surprised him. She wasn't talking about him, but who? Another mystery, another reason to want her. As she picked up her purse, he pressed his erection against her backside. "Stay just a few more minutes." She tipped her head against his chest. Tonight there'd been more urgency in her lovemaking, which he'd attributed to the murder trial's conclusion. "I can't." That sounds half-hearted. Sensing a shift, he pushed her hair aside and kissed her neck. Her sharp intake of breath pleased him. "I have to go." The trademark steel in her voice had vanished. He turned her around and unfastened the buttons of her blouse until he could see the ivory lace of her slip. He kissed her shoulder, her chin, and the top of her breast. "We have rules about avoiding tangles." "Fuck the rules, and the tangles." She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him. When she broke the connection, she was breathless. "I really have to leave in 20 minutes or I will be late." The whispered words gave no hints of the woman he'd seen on the courthouse steps late yesterday. Swamped by reporters, that woman had been cool, direct, and flawless ice. The contrasts added to the mystery. "Have dinner with me." Her fingers wrapped around his erection. "No time for talking, Detective." He swallowed, struggling to hold on to clear thought. "You're avoiding the question." Her hands moved in smooth, even strokes. 19.5 minutes. Until now, she'd called the shots, but that would change, soon. Dinner and power plays relegated to another day's battle, he kissed her as he scooped her up and laid her in the center of the bed. Straddling her, he reached for the package of condoms on the nightstand. Urgency blazed through him. He tore open the pack with an impatient jerk and slid on the rubber. As she wriggled under him, tugging up her skirt, he thought he'd explode. There was nothing else in the world that mattered more now. When he nestled between her legs, his beeper vibrated on the nightstand. Fuck. She glanced at him expectantly. "Do you need to get that?" "They can wait," he growled. She gripped his shoulders as he pressed into her. "You sure?" "Very." They both forgot about deadlines, clients, and responsibilities. Chapter 2. Tuesday, October 19th, 6:45 a.m. Detective Daniel Rockoff pulled up at the crime scene and shut the car engine off. He got out of the car and retrieved his suit jacket from the hanger in the back seat. Sliding it on, he took a moment to adjust the jacket collar and then to do a quick check of his gun, phone, and badge, which hung on his belt. He shook off his lingering drowsiness and closed the squad door. The scene was at The Wharf, an abandoned restaurant sandwiched between Union Street in Old Town Alexandria and the Potomac. The faded white building was square and set 8 feet off the ground on stilts. The exterior had been neglected since the place had closed over a decade ago, and the wooden decking and stairs looked as if they'd tumble in the next real windstorm. The place had been a popular restaurant back in the day, and the rooftop dining had offered some of the best views of the Potomac River in the area. He'd heard that the city had purchased the building and planned renovations, but given a tanking economy and a dwindling tax base, that wasn't likely. The trees along the river had turned from a deep green to a mixture of oranges, browns, and yellows. The air was a cool 60 degrees, which, compared to the summer's triple-digit numbers, felt phenomenal. The paved parking lot, fenced off from Union Street by a 10-foot chain-link fence, was filled with a half-dozen white Alexandria police-marked cars. The city's forensics van was parked on the side of the building, and the vehicle's back bay doors were open. He surveyed the area and searched for any orange cones used to indicate stray shell casings, tire marks, or anything else that might be considered evidence. He didn't see any. A handful of tourists had gathered. This was the height of the tourist season in Old Town. Ghost and historic tours ran nightly, and it was common to see large groups of people shuffling past as a guide pointed out the buildings where troubled spirits lingered past their exit dates. He'd taken a date on a city tour about 6 months ago, Monica. She'd been with the Tourism Bureau and had suggested the excursion. He'd been out of his divorce less than a year, but backbreaking hours had left him little time to date, so he'd still been rusty. The tour had been more interesting, but Monica had been more concerned about incoming text messages than him. By the end of the date, she'd called him rigid. Rigid, because he'd expected common courtesy. Shit. "Danny boy, is that the suit you wore yesterday?" The rusty voice belonged to his partner, Detective Jennifer Sinclair, a tall brunette who tended to wear jeans with a black turtleneck and a worn leather jacket. Today, as most days, she'd swept her thick hair into a bun at the base of her neck. Only on rare occasions when she wore her hair down did its lush ends brush the middle of her back. She liked to work out at the gym, had an athlete's physique, but swore she didn't enjoy sports. Raised by a single cop father, she moved among the detectives in uniforms easily, never falling prey to jabs and jokes, and always able to toss back what she received. Rockoff rested his hands on his hips. "I can't wear a suit 2 days in a row?" "You only wear your best suits to court. Court was yesterday, not today." Early this morning, he'd walked Charlotte Wellington to her car parked outside their motel room, left her with a very public kiss, and then snagged his DOP kit from the trunk of his car. He kept the kit stocked with an electric razor and other essentials. He'd been presentable in 10 minutes, but there'd been no time to drive to his apartment and collect a change of clothes. "You're a regular calendar. You gonna hit me with a weather prediction next?" Rockoff and Sinclair were 2 detectives in a 4-person homicide department. They had been in court yesterday, along with the other 2 members, Deacon Garrison and Malcolm Keir, to hear the summations in the Samantha White murder trial. White, a 30-year-old housewife, was accused of murdering her husband. Most would have bet the young woman, who'd confessed to crushing her husband's head with a golf club, would easily be convicted of first-degree murder. None of the public defenders had wanted the case. And then Charlotte Wellington had stepped into the picture, and all bets were off. Wellington had insisted her client had acted in self-defense, and the slam-dunk conviction had dissolved into uncertainty by trial's end. "So you can ask her out," Sinclair said. "Who?" "Charlotte Wellington. I saw the way you were staring at her in court yesterday. Very intense." The jab would have gotten another male cop a threatening glare, but Jennifer reminded him so much of his kid sister all he could manage was a shrug. "Maybe I was paying attention to her summation. Try it sometime." Jennifer grinned, unfazed. "So you gonna ask her out?" His gaze roamed the lot around the building. "Why would I ask her out?" "'Cause you got a thing for her?" A brackish breeze billowed the folds of his jacket. Hands on hips, he asked, "And what birdie told you that?" "Don't need a birdie, man. I can read you like a book." He smiled, more relieved than amused. She was fishing blind. "Sinclair, as much as I love girl talk, we got a victim who might like some of our attention." A half-smile raised full lips covered with no lipstick. "Whatever you say, Danny boy." They ducked under the yellow crime scene tape and past a collection of cops and cars with flashing lights. Rockoff found the uniform that had been the first responder and secured the crime scene. The guy was mid-40s, short, stocky, and sported a dark crew cut and a thick mustache. Rockoff extended his hand and introduced himself. "You're Jack Barrow, right?" "That's right." Hearing the sound of his own name relaxed the guy a fraction. "Heard you had a talent for remembering details." "No, not really. I just remembered you got that service award last spring for working with the kids in the seminary district." "Right again." Barrow hooked thick thumbs into his waistband. Sinclair shook hands with Barrow. "Your wife birthed that baby?" "Not yet," he sighed. "Damn, boy," Sinclair said. "What does this make, number 4? 5. He glanced at Rockoff. "This gal's old man trained me when I was a rookie. I think she was in elementary school then." Sinclair shook her head. "Please, no visiting the Dark Ages." Barrow tossed her a friendly wink. "She tossed a mean softball." "We're not here to talk about me or your old self," Sinclair said. "Give us the rundown." Barrow's gaze turned toward the building, and his expression grew somber. Few outsiders could understand how cops could joke in times like this. Cops, however, understood it was the jokes that got them through times like this. This one is a real freak show, sure to give cops nightmares and land on the ghost tour when the details leak out. Barrow glanced at Sinclair, all traces of humor gone. I'm sorry you're gonna have to see it. Sinclair cocked her head. I can handle it. Break your old man's heart to know you do this kind of work. For the first time, Sinclair had no quip. What drew you to the building? Rockoff said to Barrow. Saw a light in the second-story window, like a candle flickering. The place is locked up tighter than a drum because it's unsafe. City bought the building. Supposed to be torn down. Anyway, thought we might have vagrants or druggies, so I called for backup and we went to check it out. He rubbed the back of his neck with his hands. We didn't find anyone there except the victim. Male or female? Rockoff said. He pulled a notebook from the breast pocket of his jacket and a pen. Female. You see how she died? Morning light cast shadows on Barrow's face and deepened the creases. No, the scene makes me think of, well, better you just go up there and see for yourself. Sure, Rockoff said. Watch the stairs. They're old, not too stable. Thanks. He moved past Sinclair and took to the stairs first, knowing if they gave way, he might have time to warn Sinclair off. Plus, he couldn't shake the thought of Sinclair's old man cringing when his baby girl entered the scene. I could have gone first, she said. His partner didn't appreciate chivalry, so he did his best to downplay it. Then move faster next time. The stairs creaked and groaned and shifted slightly as they climbed past the first floor to the second. Sunlight streamed into the first floor, but instead of cheer, it added an eerie quality that deepened and extended the shadows. There was only one other cop on the floor and the forensics tech. No doubt there'd been some concern about structure as well as foot traffic in the dusty room. Plus, the fewer people up here, the better. Both detectives put on paper booties and snapped on rubber gloves. They moved toward the tech, Paulie Summers, a crusty guy in his late 40s who didn't tolerate interruptions well. Paulie wore a jumpsuit, booties, and gloves. Snapping pictures, he didn't bother with greetings. Paulie could be difficult to work with, but he was meticulous and a master at finding evidence a less experienced tech could miss. He would spend a good deal of time snapping pictures and documenting every inch of the crime scene before collecting data. When Paulie stepped to the left, it gave Rockoff the first real, full-on view of the victim, who lay on her back, her hands outstretched, her palms up. Her hands and feet had been nailed to the ground with wooden stakes. A neat, white, powdery substance neatly encircled the victim's body. He'd learned to put aside emotion when he viewed a crime scene. His job was to accumulate facts, details, and anything he could use to catch a killer, and so he focused on the details. The victim was young, 20s maybe, and she had a thick shock of black hair that swooped over the right side of her face. Her skin was as pale as caulk. Below the roughly hewn stakes, her fingers were curled upward as if she'd been trying to claw free. She wore a black dress and a red leather jacket. He glanced around the body and the walls for signs of blood, a spray, droplets, pools, something to tell him more about the death, but there was nothing. There's no blood, Sinclair said. No. She wasn't killed here. That's my guess, Rockoff said. Which means she was dead when she was staked to the ground. Yes. Gratitude could blossom at the direst times, Rockoff thought as he stared at the body. Rigor mortis is well established, Paulie said. Rigor mortis began 3 hours after death, but the slow stiffing of the muscles didn't peak until the 12-hour mark, when the process then began to dissipate. 8 to 12 hours since she died, Rockoff said. Give or take, and have a look at her legs. Paulie lifted her skirt to reveal her ankles, now stained a bluish purple by blood that had settled under the skin. Note the lividity. She was upright when she died, sitting maybe. Sat there for at least an hour before she was moved. When the heart stopped beating, blood traveled to the lowest point in the body, darkening the skin. I haven't been able to get a good look at the underside of her arms, but there appears to be lividity under her forearms as well. Rockoff studied the victim's neck for signs of trauma. There was some bruising. Was she strangled? I don't know. That's for the medical examiner to figure out. Knife wounds, bullet holes. First glance, nothing. But until I remove the stakes, I can't process and examine like I should. What's the circle made of? Rokov said. Polly squinted as he glanced through the viewfinder of his digital camera. I think it's salt. Salt? Everyday, regular, iodized table salt. Rokov squatted and studied the circle. He could sense Sinclair's gaze. Any thoughts, partner? Assuming the substance is salt? Her voice sounded rough with emotion. Sure. Salt has lots of uses. Keeps bugs away. Maybe the killer didn't want the ants on her. Rokov rose. It's also used in magic spells. She arched a brow. That's kind of far-fetched. This whole scene is far-fetched. In fact, when we get the go-ahead to walk around, check the corners of the room and see if there are any bits of salt there. You're joking, right? No, I'm not. The deep tenor of Rokov's voice erased whatever amusement she'd allowed. Witches. Really? I thought the Samanthas and Endoras of the world were just fiction. I'm not saying this woman was a witch, but that doesn't mean the killer didn't believe she was a witch. He could have put salt in the corner to seal the room. How would you know something like that? I've heard tales from my grandmother. She grew up in Russia, where superstition reigns. She opened her mouth to argue, but then stopped. They'd seen a lot of crazy shit over the last 18 months as partners. Rokov turned to Polly. Any other observations? Polly snapped 3 more pictures before he straightened. There are ligature marks on her neck, and the underside of her hair and her collar are damp with what appears to be water. Cause of death? Ask the medical examiner. The tech was always careful not to weigh in with an opinion. His job, he'd often said when prompted for a comment, was to collect data. He left the fancy figuring up to the detectives. Identification? Sinclair knelt by the body and stared into the woman's face, half cloaked by her hair. No identification, no jewelry, and there are red marks on the side of her neck. Looks like he got her with a stun gun several times. Polly knelt down and examined the hair draping her forehead. He snapped more pictures and then gently moved the hair back. Have a look at this. Sinclair squatted and glanced down. She's been tattooed with the word witch. The bold letters covered most of the delicate forehead skin, still puckered red and raw from the tattoo needle. Shit. Rokov's half-baked theory had been correct, but it gave him no pleasure. She have any other tats or markings? Not on the exposed areas, but there could be other body art under the clothes. I can't imagine anyone willingly doing this to themselves, Sinclair said, but we've seen all kinds of oddities. Rokov glanced around the room. The flowered wallpaper was peeling off in frayed strips, and the ceiling was soiled with a dozen watermarks. All the furniture had been stripped out, and a shadow imprint on the back wall suggested there had been a bar at one point. A thick coating of dust covered the room. Footprints? 2 distinct sets, Polly said. The first I identified as Barrows. He was kind enough not to trample all over the floor, which left me with clear impressions of the second set. Polly pointed to the window. The best impression is over by the window, and I've marked it with a cone. I've got an electrostatic dust print collector. It will pull an impression. Rokov moved toward the footprints carefully to mirror Barrows' path. It looks like a size 11 or 12. He studied the grooved pattern. Sneakers? That's my guess, but it will take time to narrow the brand. The impressions are clear and defined. He walked carefully and with precision. Polly shrugged. You know I don't make impulsive calls. I'm not holding you to it, Rokov said. That's what they all say. I'll have a report by tomorrow. Rokov studied the impression. Inside back right heel looks worn. He's favoring the foot. Polly snapped more pictures. Could be an injury, or he could have had a wart at one time, and it changed the way he walks. Doesn't mean he noticeably favors the foot now. So he moved her here, Rokov says, positions her, stakes her, and then moves to the window to stare at what? The river? The full moon? It was a clear night last night. He stops to enjoy the full moon. Maybe he heard a sound. If he's got a thing about witches, the moon makes sense, Rokov said. The full moon has a lot of power in some circles. Stands to reason he'd be drawn to the moon. Sinclair rose. We need to figure out who she is. I'll head downstairs and pull a call into missing persons and see what they have. Good. Rockoff turned to Polly. Does she have defensive wounds? Did she fight for her life? I'm gonna bag her hands. Hopefully the medical examiner will find something under her nails. Rockoff knelt by the victim's right hand and studied the crude stake that had pierced the flesh of her palm. It would have taken tremendous force to drive the wood through flesh. He wondered if she'd known her attacker. Most murdered women knew their killers. Lovers, husbands, boyfriends. Love could turn vicious instantly. I wanted you to see her before I pulled the stakes. If I can pull them out now, I can roll her over. Need a hand? Rockoff said. I got it. Polly slid on workman's gloves over his surgical gloves and grabbed a hold of the stake. The floorboards are rotted. He pulled hard, and the stake wriggled free of the floor and the victim's palm. Carefully, he moved to the other side and repeated. Then it was on to the feet. The last stake proved stubborn, and it took assistance from Rockoff to free it. Polly laid the stakes out and photographed them. Then, very carefully, he turned the body on its side. The victim's jacket was embossed with the word magic. He checked the jacket's label. Tanner's. Rockoff recognized the retailer. Tanner's is a shop in Old Town. It has a solid reputation of making custom leather jackets. Rockoff pulled a notebook from his pocket and wrote down the detail along with the dozens of others he'd noted since he entered the room. Okay, you keep doing your thing here, Rockoff said. Sinclair and I will beat the streets. Maybe somebody saw something. Outside, Rockoff found Sinclair by the car on her radio. She looked pale but determined. Thanks. If you get a match, give me a call. No matches. Not yet, but she might not have been missing 24 hours yet. Her jacket is unique. The cellar is located in Old Town. I'll double-check, but I think he opens at 10. Good. Sinclair rubbed the back of her neck. Last night was a Monday night in late October. The streets would have been packed with tourists taking ghost tours and hitting the bars. The retail shops would have been closed by 10, but the bars would have been open until 12, 1, or 2. Give or take a few hours, she died last night about 1. Yeah, there's O'Malley's on the corner. It's as good a place as any to start. Maybe someone saw someone here. Rockoff waved to Barrows, Sinclair nodded, and the detectives made their way across the parking lot. Quick strides got them across the street to O'Malley's. The pub was on the corner of Union and Prince in a 3-level townhouse that had been built 100+ years ago. Built of old brick, the building had a large glass window with gold lettering and green cafe curtains. The historic look appealed to tourists. This is ground zero for the city's tourist industry, Sinclair said. The press is going to eat this up. Rockoff glanced back at the murder scene. They'll be here within the hour, and the story will be on the news by lunch. He worked hard to push aside circumstances that he could not control, but when it came to the press, his success rate was mixed. The only way to defuse the story is to solve the case as quickly as possible. A close case would be a great way to start the week. Rockoff glanced inside O'Malley's, and when he saw the flicker of movement in the back, he pounded on the front door with his fist. For a moment, the bar's interior went silent, and then footsteps sounded inside. A tall, lean man, sporting a black 5 o'clock shadow, stopped about 20 feet short of the door. He wore a white apron over t-shirt and jeans. A bar towel hung carelessly over his right shoulder. "We're closed until 3, he shouted. The man was already turning toward the kitchen when Rockoff tapped on the glass and held up his badge. The barman turned, his face dark with frustration. "We have a few questions," Rockoff said. The man hesitated and shook his head, as if the cops were the last complication he'd expected or needed. Finally, he moved toward the door and unlatched the deadbolt. Bells jingled above as the door opened, and the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke rushed out to greet them. "Someone filing a complaint?" "Should they?" Sinclair said. The barman shifted his gaze to her and let it roam slowly and freely up her frame. He didn't smile or leer, just absorbed every detail of her. Sinclair arched a brow but didn't flinch. "You got a name?" Rockoff said. "Richardson," he said, pulling his gaze from Sinclair. "Duke Richardson. I own O'Malley's." "So, is there a reason someone would file a complaint?" Sinclair repeated. "And you are?" Richardson said. Sinclair pulled out her badge. "Detective Sinclair, this is my partner, Detective Rockoff." "Big guns," Richardson said. "I'm guessing you're not here for me, then?" "Why is that?" 10 years on the force had taught Rockoff never to trust anything at face value. He'd solved more than a couple of crimes by pure chance. Once, as a traffic cop, he'd pulled a sport utility vehicle over because of a broken taillight. The driver, a thin man with a plaid shirt, had been nervous and unable to stop fidgeting. Rockoff had called the plates into dispatch, learned there'd been no priors, but the guy had just been too damn squirrely. He'd asked the guy to get out of his car. The man had opened the door abruptly, trying to drive it into Rockoff and knock him into traffic. Rockoff had dodged the assault, stumbled, and righted himself just as the guy pulled a gun. Rockoff fired and killed the man with the first shot. Turns out, the assailant had murdered his wife and was fleeing the state. Rockoff still had moments when those tense seconds came back to him in a flash. He could recall each detail, as if the film had been put in slow motion, the way the guy's eyes had shifted to the left, the way his own hands had trembled very slightly as he'd gripped the handle of his gun tighter, the way the assailant had reached under a newspaper on the front seat and pulled out a Beretta. Rockoff could remember the sound of a horn blaring as a car passed behind him, the rust-colored stain on the man's jeans, and the sweat beading on his upper lip. It had felt like a lifetime, but in reality was mere seconds. Without realizing it, he had already eased his hand to his belt and draped his fingers over his gun handle. Duke glanced at Rockoff's hand and then held up his own. "Hey, I don't want trouble." Rockoff's own heart raced, and for a moment he said nothing. He'd not been shot, but he still had lingering moments of stress related to the incident. Charlotte had been shot, and yet she insisted she was just fine. No fucking way she'd walked away unscathed. Rockoff cleared his throat and lowered his hand. "We have a few questions. There was a problem across the street last night." Duke folded his arms over his chest. "I was open until midnight, slammed until a half hour after that. I never got more than a few feet from the bar. What happened?" Rockoff let the question pass. "See any customers that might have aroused your suspicions?" "Yeah, a lot of them." "Particulars?" Sinclair said. Duke shrugged. "A couple. One dude had to be cut off, and I called a cab for him. He didn't appreciate either gesture and told me so in so many four-letter words. And a gal, tall, dark. She sat at the corner of the bar and drank until about midnight. She didn't say much, but just sat and stared." "Either of them use a credit card?" Rockoff said. Duke shrugged. "The chick paid cash, 20s, but the dude used plastic. Name was Matt Lowry." "You remember the name?" "Sure. I took his keys. I tried to take his license, but he screamed identity theft. So I wrote down his address and gave his license back to him. Planned to mail the keys back to him this morning with a note telling him to stay clear of O'Malley's." "You take keys often?" "When I have to be sure. I don't mind anyone coming here and enjoying a few drinks, but no one is going out of here hammered with car keys. I don't need that kind of trouble." "You said you got an address for Mr. Lowry?" Sinclair said. "Sure." He turned and moved toward the bar and retrieved a padded envelope. "You can deliver his keys. Chances are he's still sleeping it off." Whoever had positioned the victim had not been drunk, but that didn't mean he'd seen the killer. A long shot, but a shot. "Just give me his address." The bartender scribbled down the address on an order pad and handed it to Rockoff. "He give you any other reason to remember him?" Sinclair said. "Talked to himself. Was a real pain in the ass, but he didn't break any laws." Rockoff took the slip of paper. "Queen Street, just a few blocks from here. What time did he leave?" "He arrived an hour before closing, and the cab picked him up about 12:30. "Where's his car?" "Parked on the street, I guess. Judging by the keys, it's a Toyota." Rockoff made a note. If they found the car, they couldn't search it without a warrant, but they certainly could have a look inside from the sidewalk. "See anything across the street in the old restaurant?" "The wharf? That's been closed for a decade. The city owns it now. No one goes there." "Someone did last night," Rockoff said. Duke shrugged. "Sometimes I see homeless people hanging around. The city keeps the place locked up pretty tight, but sometimes someone gets inside. Someone overdose?" "No overdose, but we had trouble in the building." Duke stared at Rockoff expectantly, waiting for more of an explanation, but when none came, he said, Like I said, I didn't see anything. Way too slammed. But this Lowry guy might have a word or two for you. I put him outside around midnight to cool off and sober up while he waited for the cab. There was a mix-up on my end, and my waitress didn't call the cab, so Mr. Lowry sat outside for almost an hour. He might have seen something if he didn't pass out. How drunk was he? Rockoff said. Stinking drunk. Too drunk to stand. Even if he had his keys, he wouldn't have been able to get back to his car. I doubt he'll be much of a witness. My witness testimony was sketchy even under the best of circumstances. What about waitresses or waiters? Can't help you with that. If anyone saw anything, they didn't tell me. Come back this evening and ask them if you'd like. We'll have the same crew on for tonight. Right, Rockoff said. What other stores would have been open last night after midnight? Duke's gaze narrowed. What happened across the street? Rockoff pushed out a breath. It would be all over the news soon enough. A woman's body was found in the building. I'm judging by your expression that it wasn't drugs. It was not. Duke pushed long fingers through dark, shoulder-length hair. Damn. You got an identification on the woman? No, not yet. She was wearing a red jacket with the word magic on the back. See anything like that? Duke shook his head. No, can't say. But who the hell knows? Like I said, last night I was slammed. He rested his hands on his hips. Check with Just Java across the street. They're open to midnight. Stella runs that place at night, and she keeps an eye on all. Rockoff glanced through the front window to the little coffee shop in the townhouse building painted a bright yellow. Thanks. He pulled a card out and handed it to Duke. Call me if you think of anything. Yeah, sure. Will do. They moved toward the door, and Rockoff opened it for Sinclair. Do you think it'll take long to solve this one? Duke asked. We'll try, Rockoff said. News is going to be all over it, Duke said. That they will. Duke shook his head. Shit. First it's the economy, and now a body. Karma does not like this place. Rockoff let the door close behind him. The sun had risen high in the sky, prompting him to pull Ray-Ban sunglasses from his breast pocket. Let's check out Coffee Lady, see what she knows. I hate the door-to-door knocking, the endless questions and the endless vague answers. It's amazing how much crap we have to wade through to get a few nuggets of gold. He shook his head. Beats sitting in court and having an attorney railing on my ass. Let's face it, Rockoff. You want Miss Wellington to rail on you. They paused as a Mini Cooper buzzed past and then crossed to the coffee shop. You're like a dog with a bone, Sinclair. What set you off today? The new suit for court. Super fancy, even for you. Dad made the suit for me for my birthday. Your birthday was in February. So, maybe it was just time to dust it off. Right. Get it through your head, Sinclair. The suit ain't about Charlotte Wellington. As Rockoff opened the coffee shop door, the rich scents of coffee and pastries greeted them. 3 customers waited at the register as a kid working behind the counter, looking frazzled, hustled to fill drink orders. They held back. And just for the record, Sinclair said, if Samantha White's husband really beat her as the witnesses during the trial testified, I can't say I'm against her. Wellington wins points in my book for taking the case on pro bono. He pulled off his sunglasses. I'm sure the good attorney will be relieved to know you approve. She chuckled. She doesn't give a crap about what anyone thinks about her. She is pure ice. Charlotte had been cool and reserved when they'd first met at a cancer fundraiser a month ago. Her law associate, Angie Carlson, who was married to homicide detective Malcolm Keir, had hosted the event. Rockoff had gone as a show of support to a fellow cop's wife and the cause. Charlotte Wellington was there to support Angie as well. They'd been fish out of water at the festive event and had struck up a casual conversation. At the event, she'd been reserved and cool. He'd suggested coffee, and somewhere along the way they'd ended up naked in a motel room. So, you gonna see her again? Sinclair said. There can't be an again if there wasn't a first. Sinclair nudged him with her elbow. Come clean. Buzz off. The morning crowd at Just Java had cleared, and Rockoff reached in his pocket for his badge. He flashed it as the kid looked up at them. 5-0, what's the deal? Stella here? Yeah, just a second. The kid vanished in the back and seconds later returned with an older woman in tow. She tucked stray strands of gray curly hair behind her ear. Figured when I saw the cops down the road earlier there was trouble. Kids using drugs this time or vandals? We've had trouble with both since that building was abandoned. A woman was found murdered, Sinclair said. Her body was left in the building. And you are? Rockoff said. Stella Morris. I own the place. Were you here last night? Normally I have Monday nights off, but I got a call from the kid who was working the last shift. He was sick and had to go home, so I came into work the last couple of hours and close up. You see anything? Odd customers? Trouble? A car that didn't belong? Stella rested her hands on her hips. A few buzz guys from O'Malley's wandered in before midnight, and there was a homeless guy who stops by when he can scrap together enough coins. She raised a finger. I was closing up around 12:30, and I did hear someone shouting. Shouting what? Couldn't make out the words, but it kind of sounded like howling, like a wild animal. I figured it was a drunk. What direction was the sound coming from? Sinclair said. By the wharf. That's why I thought to mention it. And that was about 12:30, Rockoff said. 12:36, as a matter of fact. The sound kind of spooked me, sent chills up and down my spine, and I glanced at my watch because I wanted to remember the time. See anything? Nope, saw nothing. Rockoff pulled out his card and handed it to her. Ever seen a woman around here with a red leather jacket that says magic? That sounds like Diane. Diane? I don't know her last name. She used to come in here a lot, but I haven't seen much of her the last 6 months. She does something with computers. She ever use a credit card? Sure, I guess, but it's been a while since she's been here. I'm gonna have to dig. Would you do that? Rockoff said. Yeah, sure, why not? She flicked the edge of the card. I'll call you. They thanked the woman and moved back down the street toward the car. Let's stroll down the street and see if we can find Lowry's car. The Toyota? Sure. Sinclair took the north side of the street and Rockoff the south side. They walked a block and a half when Rockoff spotted the silver Camry. Sinclair crossed the street. This the car? Could be. On the front seat was a briefcase. The cup holders between the seats held 2 empty cups. He's lucky no one smashed the window to get the briefcase. Maybe he was in a hurry to get to the bar. Let's pay him a quick visit. Will do. The detectives walked back to their car, and for an instant Rockoff nearly cut to Sinclair's door. If you go for my door, Danny boy, I'm breaking your fingers, Sinclair said. Rockoff held up his hands. I learned my lesson. When the two had first started working together, Rockoff had opened Sinclair's car door. She'd demanded to know which medieval century he'd just returned from. He'd laughed, blaming the door-opening habit on his parents' old country manners. They'd settled on a compromise. He'd not open the car doors, but she'd allow the occasional shop door. Sinclair slid into the passenger side seat and Rockoff behind the driver's wheel. As he fired up the engine, the first television news van pulled up outside the crime scene. The media is gonna love this one. I'm afraid you're right. The drive to Lowry's took minutes, and soon the two were standing on the doorstep of his townhouse. Painted white with black shutters, the townhouse was modern but fashioned to look colonial. A planter on the front porch sported drooping marigolds and several cigarette butts. Rockoff rang the bell once. After a pause, he hit it again, and when that didn't produce results, he banged with his fist. Finally, they heard shouts and the stumble of footsteps. The door snapped open. A man, wincing against the sunlight, greeted them with an angry glare. Dressed in suit pants and a V-neck t-shirt, he had greasy dark hair that stuck up in the back and a dark beard shadowing his lantern jaw. A thick cross hung from a thick gold chain around his neck. What the hell do you want? Rockoff held up his badge. You Matt Lowry? Yeah. You at O'Malley's last night? Sure, and if you're here to ask, I didn't drive home drunk. I took a cab. So we hear, said Sinclair. She glanced beyond him to a foyer warmed with oriental rugs and a landscape on the wall. The bartender tells us he parked you outside on a bench last night. He rubbed a bloodshot eye with his knuckle. Damn near froze my nuts off while I was waiting. You see anything? Rockoff said. I was pretty hammered." "Unusual people? Odd sounds?" Sinclair prompted. Lowry shoved out a sigh as if pushing through the fog of his hangover. "I thought I saw someone at the old restaurant across the street." Rockoff tensed. "What did you see?" "Shit, I don't know. It was late and dark, and like I said, I was hammered. I just figured it was a couple getting busy." "A couple?" "Saw a man with a woman at his side on the top floor. They went in, and a light came on." "You see the guy or the woman?" "No, just their outlines. He was holding her close and kissing her like he couldn't wait to get her alone." He sniffed. "So what's their deal?" "She's dead, and we think he killed her." Chapter 3. Tuesday, October 19th, 9 a.m. Charlotte Wellington's heels clicked against the sidewalk as she turned on her BlackBerry and checked her messages. 2 clients, her realtor, clerk of the court, the apartment manager of the Seminary Towers, and a number she did not recognize. As she walked the block toward her office, she called the clerk first. His message had been in response to a call from her. No verdict in the Samantha White case yet. "Good," she muttered. "They have questions and are thinking." She dialed her realtor, and 2 rings later heard a perky, "Hello, Charlotte, how are you?" "Great, Robert, as long as you have not had other problems with my condo sale." "It's nothing huge this time. The man buying your condo called to say the home inspector has 2 issues. He says there is a leaky faucet in the second bathroom, and the lock on the exterior storage closet rattles. He wants you to fix them both. He also wants to move the closing date up to the 30th. "Robert, I've made enough price concessions to this guy. I agreed to be out the middle of next month, and now he wants 2 weeks and 2 minor issues fixed? He is officially a pain in the ass. The place is stunning, one of a kind. He should be grateful the place came on the market." 5 years ago, I'd have agreed. These days, just be grateful you got asking price. Besides, Charlotte, these are minor changes. You could hire a handyman to take care of both issues in an hour, and the new move-out date is only 15 days earlier. 15 days is a lifetime for me this year. Given a different set of financial circumstances, this last request would have been the final straw. She'd have pulled the condo from the market and told the buyer to buzz off. But she needed the money from the condo sale more than extra time to arrange the move. The law practice had hit a dry spell that she fully expected to ride out in the long run, but short-term, cash flow was strangling her. "I don't have the time to track down a handyman, and I haven't even called a mover." "I'll call the handyman and a mover that I trust. My guy can have the minor repairs made today, and my other guy can have you safely moved out in 15 days. She tightened her grip on her briefcase handle. "I don't like being pushed like this." "This is a huge sale, Charlotte. It would be a shame for you to lose out, and I know you really want this." People chose Robert because he was aggressive and had a reputation for quick, high-dollar sales. His customers either needed cash or a quick move. Seeing as she wasn't leaving Alexandria, it didn't take a huge leap for him to figure out that money drove this sale. Life had backed her into a corner before, and she'd learned that survival depended on adaptability. "Fine, get your man in to fix the problems and find me a mover. One way or the other, I'll be ready to move out by the new date." Great. This will be worth the effort." "It needs to be." She said her goodbyes and hung up. As she walked, she called one client and left a voicemail. She was dialing the second when her phone rang. Her realtor. "Robert?" "You're good to go. I've taken care of everything." "Great." "Plan to close in 15 days. "Okay." "It's going to be fine." The soft edge in his voice suggested unwelcome pity. "It's going to be better than fine, Robert." She hung up, moving down the tree-lined brick sidewalk past the historic townhouses. When Charlotte arrived at the office, she unlocked the front door, which always remained secured. She'd never fretted over security and enjoyed an open-door policy until a man had waltzed into her law offices 3 years ago and shot her. She'd returned to her office 1 week after the surgery to inspect the installation of her office's new security system. She'd insisted that she was recovering nicely and had no lingering issues after the shooting, but the truth was worry stalked her constantly. Her world became smaller and smaller, and she'd begun to feel quite alone in it. Perhaps it was that self-imposed isolation that had driven her to Rockoff, and why being with him was exhilarating and addictive. If she still saw her analyst, he'd have had quite a field day with her choice to finally break a 4-year dry spell with a cop, a protector. She found her receptionist grinning like a little girl. Iris was a 50-plus, silver-haired woman who dressed in pinks and madras. Generally stoic, she was efficient and had the office organized down to the last paperclip. "Hey, boss." Iris was grinning when she offered Charlotte her standard morning greeting. Charlotte paused, taken back by the unexpected grin. Whose birthday did I forget? She didn't celebrate holidays and often forgot her own birthday. Consequently, she wasn't good about remembering most milestone events that were so important to others. Iris grinned. "No birthday?" "There is something. What did I miss?" "You didn't miss anything. Angie decided to surprise us." Iris handed her a half-dozen pink message slips. She wasn't fond of surprises. Why? "Relax. Surprises can be good, Charlotte." She flipped through the messages. "So you keep telling me. So what is the good surprise?" "Angie has brought in a cake and we're having a mini celebration." "The celebration is for?" "Her fundraiser for the American Cancer Society. She just received several pledges late yesterday that are going to put her near the $1 million mark." Angie, a cancer survivor, had suggested a fall Halloween fundraiser for the Children's Cancer Ward at Alexandria Hospital. To make the event happen, she'd twisted arms, including Charlotte's, and called in favors. She transformed a once sleepy event into a big costumed Halloween party that was going to be not only a moneymaker, but the event of the year. "So we eat cake." "We do. Now put down your bag and get into the conference room. And don't tell me you have work. You always have work." Charlotte rarely took time to celebrate milestones like this, so consumed with success that the instant she reached one hurdle, she set her sights on the next. Angie was teaching her to slow down, if only a little, every so often. She slipped into her office, set down her briefcase, and touched up her lipstick. She found her staff in the conference room. Angie Carlson Keir stood at the head of the table, wielding a knife over a large pumpkin-shaped cake. Beside her was Zoe Morgan, their new paralegal. Tall, lean, with black hair that grazed her shoulders, she had been a dancer in her teens, but had suffered an injury that had ended her career. She'd worked for several nonprofits, but had accepted a job here 5 months ago. So far, she was turning into a real asset. Charlotte smiled and tried not to calculate the billable hours idling in this room. Angie's smooth blonde hair hovered around her jawline. She wore a simple cream-colored suit and a white blouse. Since Angie had adopted her son, David, she cut back her hours to 40 a week, part-time for a lawyer. Angie had declined partnership on the heels of Charlotte losing her original partner, Sienna James, to a lover in Texas. Sienna's buyout, Angie's inability to buy into the firm, and the lost billable hours to the White case had created the crippling cash flow crunch. "I can hear the wheels turning in your brain, Charlotte," Angie said. "We will take just a few moments to have this mini celebration, and then it's back to work." Charlotte relaxed her shoulders and eased the tension from her face. "No rush." Everyone laughed. "I don't see the humor," Charlotte said. Angie grinned. "You not rushing is funny. And by the way, you did a stunning job with summations yesterday. You've the makings of a great criminal attorney." She'd been pleased with her closing comments yesterday, and judging by the jury's body language, she'd planted real seeds of doubt. "So I hear you've reached a new high in fundraising." "We've passed the $1 million mark with our fundraiser. We've shattered all expectations, and we've not even held the party in auction." Charlotte clapped, her smile genuine now. "You've a lot to be proud of, Angie." "Thanks." Pragmatic, even calculating to a fault, Charlotte recognized that this event benefited not only the community, but also Wellington and James. She'd learned at an early age that those who weren't always scraping for the next morsel went hungry. Angie cut the cake and doled out pieces to everyone. Charlotte bit into the chocolate cake and savored the hidden flavors of espresso. Angie had been raised in an affluent home and knew all the best caterers and bakers in town. She also knew the best schools, the best dance studios, and the most prestigious social events. Not that Angie focused on such things. She didn't. But it struck Charlotte that what came so naturally to Angie had required painstaking research for her. She built her list of the best, one name at a time. It was very important to her to cultivate the impression that she, too, had grown up in a world similar to Angie's. "So, how's the baby?" Zoe asked. "David is great," Angie said. "He's walking and tearing up everything in his path. Malcolm has the day off, so the two went to the park. Malcolm said it's a male bonding kind of thing." "What does that mean?" Iris said. "Who knows? Likely they take off their shirts, paint their faces, and run through the woods at the park hunting squirrels." Zoe's eyes widened. "You're kidding." Angie laughed. "Yes, I'm kidding. Most likely it's an ice cream at the carnival and a few games of chance there. Then the afternoon in front of the television watching the Dallas game that I taped for him while he was working." Zoe shook her head. "I'd read that the carnival opened last Friday, but I hadn't thought to go." "For David and Malcolm, it will be great fun. For me, not so much. I was never a fan of carnivals. Too dirty." Charlotte glanced at her cake and poked at it with her fork. Too dirty. The front door buzzer sounded, and Iris moved to answer it. Charlotte raised her hand. "Sit, I'll get it." She set down her cake, almost untouched, and moved down the hallway. As much as she enjoyed her staff, she understood that there would always be distance between them because she was the boss. She checked the security camera behind Iris's desk and spotted a man, his face turned part way from the camera. The ends of his flannel shirt hung over the painfully narrow waist of faded jeans. He had gray hair and what looked like a scruffy beard. He finished the dregs of a cigarette and then crushed it out in a stone planter filled with white mums. "Nice," Charlotte muttered. She considered calling the cops just as the man turned and faced the camera. He grinned as if he sensed she was staring at him. She jerked back and for a moment could barely breathe. Time had weathered the face and grayed the hair, but there was no mistaking the sharp gray eyes that had been a fixture in a childhood she'd worked hard to erase from her memory. She stepped back from the screen, her heart knocking against her chest. "What the hell are you doing here, Grady Tate?" The carnival was in town, but she'd stayed away because she did not want to see him. He must have seen the news coverage of the trial yesterday. As if she'd spoken directly to him, Grady rang the bell again and then again. His arrival was clearly no accident, and he was not going anywhere. Iris appeared at reception. "Who's ringing the bell?" Pure, sharp panic cut into Charlotte's belly. "I'll take care of it." Iris glanced at the monitor. "He looks like something the cat dragged in." "He has that effect on people." "Who is he?" Charlotte smoothed hands over her black pencil skirt. "Nobody." Iris folded her arms. "Really? Well, nobody has rattled your cage." "He has not." "Your lips are blue." She moistened her lips and offered a smile too brittle to be amiable. "Just go back to the party and enjoy your cake." Iris tapped a manicured finger on her forearm. "I think I'll stay right here and make sure nobody isn't a problem." Charlotte did not want Iris to meet Grady. Past colliding with present promised disaster. But making an issue could require more explaining down the road. "Eat your cake, Iris. I'll shout if I need you." Plucked brows nodded. "I don't like it." "I know. Thanks. But go, please." "Fine." Swallowing the tension in her throat, Charlotte crossed and opened the front door. Grady's fist was poised in the air, ready to knock again. For a moment, he stared at her, stunned into silence. She'd changed, a lot, since the long-ago night he'd put her on the metro bus to Alexandria. His gaze moved over her, assessing and calculating, before a slow, dangerous smile curved thin lips. "Hello, Grace." Blood rushed to Charlotte's head, making her temples pound. She'd not heard that name in 18 years. "My name is Charlotte Wellington." "Yeah, I saw you on the television last night. Sounds like you tore it up at that trial yesterday. Got to say, I was surprised to see you. I always figured you'd have left the area after all these years." Tension seared her nerves. "What do you want, Grady?" If he noticed her unease, he didn't seem to care as he glanced beyond her into the reception area. "Aren't you gonna invite me in? Looks mighty fancy inside." She shifted and blocked his view. "What do you want, Grady?" His gaze thinned, the pretense of civility melting like ice on a scorching day. What emerged was the hard, cold man who had been her stepfather. "You always could piss me off in no seconds flat. Get to the point or leave." "I raised you to respect your elders better than that, didn't I, Grace?" "You tracked me down after all this time to issue a lesson in good manners? I find that a hard one to swallow." He slid gnarled hands in the pockets of his jeans and leaned forward. "Invite me in and make nice, or I swear everyone in this town will know you are not some fancy attorney, but a low-life carny who did what she had to do to put pennies in her pocket." The scents of the carnival, tobacco, cotton candy, popcorn, and grease, wafted off him, and instantly she was transported back to a time when she'd lived her days in fear and want. Despite half a lifetime of creating Charlotte Wellington, Grady could smash her image with a few words. "Come inside, but do not call me Grace." His smile flashed again, quick and razor-sharp. "Now that is more like it, Ms. Wellington." Charlotte stood back and waited for him to enter her reception area. Past and present had merged, and 18 years' worth of fear, regrets, and dread came to fruition. "What do you want, Grady?" He took his time surveying the room, taking in the oil landscape paintings, the oriental rugs, the sleek mahogany receptionist desk, and the gold-embossed sign that read Wellington and James. "Mighty fancy, baby girl." He sniffed and shook his head. "Mighty fancy." "Don't call me baby girl." "You liked it when I called you that back in the day." She folded her arms over her chest. "I never liked it, and if you haven't noticed, back in the day is long gone." He shook his head and winked at her. "You can rewrite your past for all your fancy friends, but you and I both know the real story." Tension coiled in her belly. "What do you want, Grady?" "Can't I just come and see you, baby girl?" Grady had entered her life when she was 8 and her sister Mariah 10. Her mother, reeling from her latest breakup, had met Grady when the carnival had come to Knoxville, Tennessee. Before it broke camp 3 weeks later, her mother had moved them into his recreational vehicle. By the age of 8, Charlotte had been in 5 different schools and lived in 9 different motels in 9 different towns. This move in her young mind was as temporary as the others. But for reasons she never understood, Charlotte's mother and Grady had forged some kind of bond, and before Christmas of that same year, they married. Her mother, Doris, had started working in the carnival's Madame Divine tent as the resident psychic, while Grace and Mariah did odd jobs around the carnival. It had gone fairly well for a time. Her mother was happy, Mariah had begun sleeping again, and she'd been able to finally keep the books she'd accumulated at yard sales. But within 7 or 8 months, Grady rediscovered the bottle and proved to be a nasty drunk. Her mother and Grady shared 5 years of explosive bliss, and when Doris died, her daughters remained with Grady. The time would have been miserable if not for Mariah. Laughter from Charlotte's co-workers drifted from the back conference room, prompting her to lower her voice a notch. "You never do anything without a reason. What do you want? Money?" He glanced toward the laughter and then grinned, still taking pleasure in her unease. "I don't need your money, though it sure does look like you're doing real fine for yourself." Nothing she could say would drive him faster to the point he'd come to make. Grady would take his sweet time. "You were always a prickly one, the worrier of my 2 girls." "You were good at giving me enough to worry about." Bitterness dripped from the words. Maybe. He walked to the receptionist desk and picked up a crystal paperweight. For several seconds he studied it. "I've been sober for 18 years. "Good for you." He tossed the paperweight like a worn baseball. "I need your legal help." The paperweight had been a gift to Iris last year. It had been handmade by a glassmaker at Alexandria's Torpedo Factory, an artist enclave on Union Street. It had cost $600. She took the paperweight from him. "I saw the article in the paper and know the carnival is in town. Did one of your boys get arrested?" He curled his empty fingers and lowered them to his side. "I could see where you'd think that. The boys do tend to mix it up from time to time." "Drunk in public? Theft? Fighting? Your employees have a talent for getting into trouble, and I have no intention of helping any one of them." He arched a brow. "You got some attitude in you, girl." "And your point is?" "Maybe I could bring you down a peg and let the folks in the back know that you didn't come from such refined stock. Maybe I should tell them you was born a low-life carny just like me." Threats were par for the course for a defense attorney. Most either rolled off her back or amused her. This one struck at the core. But she also knew Grady well enough. If she showed weakness or caved in to his demands, he'd own her. She'd buy his silence for a time, but there would be more and more favors. He'd worm into her life like a cancer, and in the end still tell everyone about the past she wanted to forget. "Go ahead, tell them, and when you're finished, get the hell out of my life." Gray eyes narrowed and glared as if he were dealing with a disobedient child. When she'd been a kid, that look had scared her. It still did a little, but she'd gotten much better at bluffing. Now or never. He hesitated, waited. She waited, barely blinking. Finally, he nodded, grinned, and bowed his head slightly. "Now, baby girl, I did not mean for this to turn into a pissing match. I've come with hat in hand to see if you can help me, for old time's sake." This victory of Will's was small, but a first. Grady never did anything hat in hand. "I won't help you or any of your carnies get out of jail. I'm done with that life, Grady. There's no going back for me." Her normally controlled voice had slipped back into an accent she'd worked so hard to destroy. "I wouldn't be asking for me or any of those slobs that pretend to work for me." She shrugged. "Then why are we having this conversation?" "I came about sooner." Hearing the name smacked her gut like a 1-2 punch. She could feel the color drain from her face as she scrambled to remain stoic. The last time Charlotte had seen Sooner, the girl had been 8 days old. Regret and sadness scorched her, and for an instant she couldn't draw in a breath. She thought about that baby often, and of the night she'd left her behind. "You didn't give me a choice, as I remember." "It wasn't hard to get you to leave. You'd been dreaming about leaving for years." "Mariah had died. I couldn't handle staying." "You didn't have the grit to stay." "I was 16, Grady, not more than a child myself." "Tell that to the baby girl who looks so much like Mariah that it'll take your breath away." Tears welled in her eyes, and for several seconds she could not speak for fear her voice would crack. "You told me you were going to put Sooner up for adoption. You said she'd have a real home." He rubbed his clean-shaven chin. "I decided it was best she stay with me." "What?" Her head spun. Of all the scenarios she'd imagined over the years, this was not one of them. "You swore on Mariah's grave you'd give her a real home." "I gave her a real home." He straightened his shoulders. "I did right by the girl." "If you kept her, you didn't do right by her." "She turned out all right. She's smart and quick." Bitterness soured her stomach as she imagined that innocent baby growing up in the grit and dirt of the carnival. "Where is she now, Grady?" "Got herself arrested for shoplifting from a store owner." "What kind of store?" Dark, heartbreaking scenarios swirled through her mind. "Crystals, cards, bracelets, knick-knack shit. She always liked that kind of stuff. Makes sense, I suppose, since she is the new Madame Divine." Anger choked her throat. "You put her to work in the tent?" "She wanted to work." "Why isn't she in school?" "She got herself a good education. Homeschooled, but it's worked out fine. She's smart as a whip." All the hopes and dreams she'd had for Sooner dried up and blew away like dust. "Not so smart. She's been arrested." "She didn't do it. She said the shopkeeper made a pass at her, and when she told him to fuck off, he got mad. He called the cops, whining about stolen crystals. He held her until the cops showed." To cope with emotions too extreme to name, she focused on the facts. Her mind clicked through the consequences of shoplifting. "What was the item?" "Some fancy crystal. Expensive from what I hear." "Does she have an arrest record?" Gray eyes thinned. "No, she's a good kid." "Where is she now?" "In court. Arraigned today. Maybe right now." Charlotte stared at him a long moment. Nothing could have dragged her back into Grady's world. Nothing, except Sooner. And he knew that. I'll get my briefcase. I'll go with you. No, don't. In fact, I don't even want to see you near the courthouse. You don't mix well with cops, and I don't need to deal with your temper on top of everything else. I won't lose my temper. That made her smile. Of course you will. You always do. Grady slid his hands into the back pockets of his jeans. You'll take care of it then? I will. She checked her watch. What's her full name? Sooner Mariah Tate. Tate. Sure, it's a good name. Facts. Think about the facts. Morning court will be in session for at least another hour. If I hurry, I might catch her case. Thank you. Don't thank me, Grady. Just stay away from me. Chapter 4. Tuesday, October 19th, 10:15 a.m. Charlotte reached the courthouse 15 minutes later. She hustled up the front steps in her heels and dashed up to the line for the metal detectors. Normally, the wait irritated her. Today, it made her want to scream. A man in front of her kept setting off the scanner, which required him to return and empty more from his pockets. When it was Charlotte's turn to pass, she made it through without a glitch, and then quickly grabbed her personal items and briefcase as they passed through the scanner. She dashed up the stairs to the second-floor courtroom and quietly slipped inside General Court. Taking a seat in the back, she scanned the room. There were at least 6 girls being arraigned. 3 were dressed like hookers, 1 wore ragged jeans with slumped shoulders, 1 looked drunk, and the last one sat alone and quiet, facing the judge. The last girl had long dark hair that brushed the middle of her back. Instantly, Charlotte's gaze went to the last girl. The hair, the narrow breadth of her shoulders, and the way she tilted her head to the right instantly reminded her of Mariah. The courtroom melted away for a second, and she was transported back to an afternoon when 2 teenage sisters sat in the trailer. God, Grace, do you have to brush my hair so hard? Mariah wailed. Stop being a baby. You said you wanted tight braids to go with your Indian costume, and that's what I'm giving you. Not that tight. Stop. I'd kill for your hair. You would not. I would. The thick mane was so black, blue highlights shimmered in the strands when the light hit just right. Once they'd dressed, the sisters were going to a Halloween party at the local high school. Mariah was the Indian, and Grace was the cowboy. Neither attended regular school, and though it never bothered Mariah, it did bother Grace. Whenever they were in a town, Grace would check to see what functions were being held at the area schools. They gravitated toward the big fall and spring events, football games, plays, homecoming, and prom, knowing blending would be easier. They'd dress, hitch a ride to the school, and for a few hours they'd mingle and pretend that they were regular kids. The next case is the Commonwealth versus Sooner Mariah Tate. She's been charged with credit card theft, petty larceny, and resisting arrest. Charlotte glanced at the bailiff and then to the judge. What was the judge's name? Rosen. Judge Sylvia Rosen. The graying, pale woman didn't raise her gaze from the papers on the bench. Will the defendant rise? The girl with the long dark hair rose and for a moment turned her head in profile. Charlotte's breath caught. The girl was the image of Mariah, and for a few seconds it felt as if Mariah had returned from the dead. Tears choked Charlotte's throat. Charlotte swallowed, shifted her gaze to the judge, rose, and moved with purpose and direction toward the center courtroom aisle. Clearing her throat, she moved beside the girl, who now stood in front of the judge. Judge Rosen, Charlotte said. Charlotte Wellington. I am counsel for the defense. She didn't offer a glance in Sooner's direction, but sensed the girl's confusion and relief. The judge lifted a somewhat surprised gaze to Charlotte. Miss Wellington, this isn't your normal beat. No, it is not, Your Honor, but I've been retained to represent Ms. Tate. Very well, Miss Wellington. How does your client plead? Not guilty, and I move that the charges be dropped. Silver bracelets jangled from Sooner's wrist as she dug long fingers through her hair. She shifted her stance as if she wanted to speak. The judge made a note. Why is that? This is my client's first offense. She just turned 18 a week ago. And the creep tried to assault me, Sooner said. Her voice had the same rusty quality as Mariah's. He planted those crystals in my purse. I didn't even know they were there. He's just mad because I wouldn't sleep with him and I called him fat." A rumble of chuckles passed through the courtroom, prompting the judge to raise her gaze and silence everyone with a look. "The police report mentions your complaint that he attempted sexual assault, but there is no evidence to support the claim." "It's the truth," Sooner said. Charlotte held up a manicured hand, silencing the girl. "I know the court's dockets are full and there are more important cases to consider." The judge stared at the attorney with a cynical eye. They both knew that this case, a first offense, did not warrant a great deal of her time. "All right, counselor, I'll bite. What do you suggest?" "Charges be dismissed." The suggestion seemed to amuse the judge. "Just like that." "She has no priors, and she is young, but if the court wishes, I can prepare an extensive case on her behalf." The judge studied Charlotte. "Why her? Why now?" "Because I never should have left her with Grady. My practice is dedicating more time to pro bono work." "Yes, I heard your summation was something to see yesterday. However, this case won't get you much publicity." "Nevertheless, I am fully committed to the defense." The judge drummed her fingers on the bench. "All right, I'll concede, but your reputation is bailing this kid out, counselor." The judge didn't hesitate and rapped her gavel. "Charges are dismissed, but if Miss Sooner Tate gets into trouble again, it's your hide, counselor." "Agreed." The judge hit her gavel on the bench. "Case dismissed." Sooner looked at Charlotte, her dark eyes searching and angry. "Did I just admit that I did it?" As the bailiff read the next set of charges, Charlotte took the girl tightly by the arm and led her out of the courtroom. Outside in the busy hallway, Sooner pulled free and glared at Charlotte. "I didn't do it." The charges were dismissed. This close, standing face to face, Charlotte got her first real look at the girl. She had long dark hair and olive skin like Mariah's, but her eyes were as green as Charlotte's. She was slender, as tall as Charlotte, and held herself with surprising poise. Her billowy, loose dress was sleeveless, revealing not only a slender figure underneath, but also a tiger tattoo on the inside of her right forearm. "Yeah, but it sounds like I'm on some kind of watch list for the next year." "We both are." Charlotte had 1,000 questions for the girl about her life. "If you keep your nose clean, then we won't have a problem." "Hey, I was just shopping." Sooner's raised voice caught the attention of several passers-by. "The creep expected more because I work at the carnival." "Lower your voice." Sooner folded her arms over her chest and looked almost as if she were pouting like a kid. "He was gross." "Maybe it's time to find yourself another job." "Working the Madame Divine tent is a good gig, and it sure beats slinging fast food or straightening the bottles at the baseball toss." Anger, grief, and sadness swirled around her, and she raced to keep ahead of them. "I don't know what to tell you, Sooner. The tent is not the best place for a kid. Neither is the carnival." Sooner shrugged. "Beats the streets." "That sounds like something Grady would say." Bitterness added bite to the words. Her eyes narrowed. "Grady said I had an aunt who was a fancy attorney, but I didn't believe him." "He said that?" "Yeah, but if you know Grady, he says a lot of stuff. So why would a fancy attorney aunt like you do something Grady asked?" "I did it for you." She'd often wondered what she'd say to Sooner if she ever saw her again. She'd assumed she'd feel love or tenderness, not irritation. "How about you just thank me for keeping you out of jail?" "They wouldn't have sent me to jail." "You don't think so?" "Grady said not to worry when he came to visit me in jail." Charlotte snorted, and we both know Grady never lies. "He has to have something. Aunt or no, a fancy woman like you doesn't mix with people like me." "I was a girl like you. Just do us both a favor and keep your nose clean." "You look upset." "I'm not." Heat rose in her body, and tears burned the back of her throat. It was too much seeing Sooner, seeing Mariah. There was so much to say and no adequate words. Overwhelmed, she hurried down the stairs, telling herself that it was okay to run. She'd done her good deed for the day. She and Sooner might have connected a very long time ago, but clearly Sooner was all grown up, no doubt wise beyond her years. She didn't need Charlotte. And still, when she reached the front door of the courthouse, she glanced back. Sooner's head was turned, and she was talking to a man. He was grinning, and clearly his interests in her were not very pure. Sooner's stance suggested that she understood exactly what kind of effect she had on him. Mariah had been like that. Even at 16, Mariah could make any man, no matter how straight-laced, old or young, want her. Charlotte turned from Sooner, and for a moment wondered how different their lives would have been if she'd stayed with the carnival or taken the child with her. "Focus on what you can fix," Charlotte muttered as she pushed through the front door of the courthouse and headed down the steps. As she glanced down the steps toward the street, she spotted a very familiar set of broad shoulders. Detective Daniel Rockoff. His tall build set him head and shoulders above most in a crowd, as did the finely tailored suit that tapered so perfectly from his broad shoulders to his lean waist. He'd worn that suit yesterday. He'd answered that page and realized he'd not have time to go home and change. Early this morning, just as she'd reached for her purse at the motel room, he'd grabbed her by the hand, tugged her toward him, and kissed her. She'd leaned into his warmth as if she'd never been touched. Encouraged, he'd cupped her face and kissed her a second time. She'd wanted him so much. "Have dinner with me," he whispered by her ear, and no dodging the question this time. Her perfume still clung to his skin. "You didn't seem to mind my artful dodging." "I want to know more about you." "Getting to know each other isn't part of the deal." "What is the deal?" "I don't know anymore." "Sex?" He traced her jaw with his thumb. "Maybe it's time to start thinking outside the box." The easy freedom they'd promised in the beginning had vanished, and that was not good. Sleeping with a cop was one thing, but dating one, especially one like Rockoff, was another. He wouldn't be content with pieces of her. He'd want everything, present, future, and past. "We shouldn't see each other anymore." His pager went off again, and when he'd glanced at the number, his face had darkened. "This isn't over, counselor." He was the last person she needed to see right now. Her nerves were raw, her defenses down, and Rockoff would detect the weakness and use it. Charlotte pulled her dark sunglasses from her purse and put them on as she moved toward him. Of course, there'd be no avoiding him, but then why should they dance around each other? They were adults. His partner, Jennifer Sinclair, said something, and it prompted a smile that softened the warrior's visage. However, when he glanced up and shifted his gaze to her, the smile faded. Dark sunglasses covered his eyes and tossed back her reflection. A slight ripple of tension moved through his body as he took a step toward her. She hesitated, managed a professional smile, and quickly riffled through the endless small-talk topics at her disposal. Weather was safe. Cases were not, even if she was tempted to ask what had summoned him away this morning. Sooner Tate stepped into Charlotte's line of sight, cutting off her view of Rockoff. "Hey, thanks for what you did in there. I know I was a bit of a bitch, and I'm sorry." She glanced beyond the girl to Rockoff. He tossed a questioning look her way, and then turned his gaze back to his partner. Charlotte focused on the girl and was grateful he hadn't approached. "It's okay." An awkward silence settled as they stared at each other. Sooner rubbed long fingers, sporting rings and black nail polish, over worn jeans. "I need a little help." "Are you in more trouble?" It was like Grady not to tell the whole story. Annoyance flashed in Sooner's green eyes. "Why do you say that?" "Look where we are, Sooner. I just got you off a theft charge." Sooner's jaw tightened. "I don't need your elitist bullshit." Charlotte didn't rise to the bait. In fact, she found the girl's flare of temper amusing. "Sounds like you do need my elitist bullshit." "I don't need you or anyone else. I can do what I need to alone." Her tone had risen, and a few folks around them glanced in their direction. "Sooner," Charlotte said in a softer tone, "what do you need?" Sooner flexed her fingers and then, with a conscious effort, released the tension from her body. "I want to open a shop, a place where I can put down roots, read fortunes, crystals. I'm tired of traveling with the carnival." The ambition didn't really surprise Charlotte. In fact, she was proud of it. "Does Grady know about this?" "No, and I'd like to keep it that way. He can be controlling." Charlotte couldn't disagree. He doesn't want you to leave. No. According to the papers, this is the last season for the carnival, she said. Don't believe it. Grady uses the last season angle to get us more press. He's been playing that card for a couple of seasons. So, like Grady, always playing an angle. And when he hits the road again next year? He'll come up with something. He always does. She rubbed the back of her neck with her hand. The thing is, I'm tired of the road. I want a real life. She'd felt the same way at that age. And a shop is the answer? I've got money saved, and I'm good with the cards. I get a lot of repeat customers. That doesn't mean you can make a living. I'm the biggest draw at the carnival. Sooner spoke directly with no bravado. I can turn this into a business. She admired the girl's ambition. She might be naive, but she wanted to go places. She was Charlotte 18 years ago. So what do you need from me? I don't know much about leases, and I don't want to put my name on a contract without someone reading it. You want me to read the lease agreement? Yes, and I'd like you to see the space. Why me, Sooner? You're all I got, Auntie Charlotte. No missing the edge. Nobody at the carnival could help me, and if they did, they'd tell Grady, and he'd do something to screw it up. Nobody gets out unmarked. Mariah had voiced those same words often. You know Grady well. She swallowed. I know his type. If you're my mother's sister, he's what, your stepfather? Not anymore. Her grip on her briefcase handle tightened. I'll help you with the lease. When do you want to meet at the site? Sooner's eyes narrowed. Clearly, her curiosity of Charlotte and Grady warred with her desire for help. Desire and ambition won. Any time Thursday would work. I just have to tell the guy a time. Charlotte fished her BlackBerry out of her briefcase and checked her calendar. How does 1 work? I don't have to be at work until 5. 1 it is. Do you have the address? It's 101 Washington Street. Nice area. And right smack dab in the middle of her world. The past had arrived in Alexandria and had set up shop. It's a small space in a bookstore, but it's in a high tourist area, and traffic is king. You've learned a few lessons from Grady. She'd learned her own share of lessons from Grady. Most weren't good lessons, but a few were. Like it or not, the guy knew how to work the crowds, and he knew how to spin a profit out of nothing. However, the comparison didn't sit well with Sooner. I'd like to think I figured out a lot for myself. Don't be offended. It's a compliment. See you Thursday. Sure. Thanks, Aunt Charlotte. Please, just call me Charlotte. A small grin lifted full lips. Charlotte it is. And, Charlotte, I won't horn in on what you've got going here. I can see that I make you uncomfortable. It's a big enough city, so we won't ever have to see each other. I don't have a problem with you being in town. The first hit of shock had eased, and her mind was already crammed with more questions for Sooner. Sure you do. It's written all over you. But it's okay. It'll be like we never met after Thursday. She watched the girl walk away, already knowing she'd go to the mat for the kid. So who was the girl? Rockoff's deep baritone voice hovered above her. Charlotte remembered why she and Rockoff would never make it. One day she'd have to lie to him, and that day was today. She's a kid I represent in court, pro bono work. You're doing a lot of that lately. He smelled of motel soap and his own aftershave. Seems so. Did she imagine that he'd sensed the lie? What was her offense? Shoplifting. Sooner vanished around the corner. She guilty? She arched a brow. None of my clients are guilty, Detective Rockoff. You know that. That's right, I forgot. So what brings you to the courthouse? There's a shop down the street that might be able to help me with a case. I'd just parked and was passing by when I saw you. And so you stopped. Her BlackBerry buzzed, snagging her attention down at the screen. Unknown caller. Hey, I need to get back. I'm burning the candle at both ends today. He frowned. Sure, see you soon, Charlotte. Sure thing, Detective Rockoff. Detective Rockoff? It's your name. Kind of formal. It's the agreement. He leaned forward a fraction. Time to renegotiate, counselor. Her phone buzzed again in her hand. I really do have to go. Run along. She walked away slowly and carefully, as if she didn't have one regret or worry. She glanced at her text. Appreciate the help. GT. GT. Grady Tate. Son of a bitch. What were the chances she'd seen the last of Grady Tate? Slim to none. Rockoff and Sinclair entered Tanner's on King Street just as the owner flipped the closed sign to open. The owner was in his mid-60s and had been in the custom leather business for decades. Rockoff's father had once said the man was an artist, and judging by the collection of leather jackets hanging from the wall, he didn't doubt it. "Mr. Tanner," Rockoff said, pulling his badge from his pocket. "Mind if I ask you a couple of questions?" The old man lifted his gaze from a gray leather jacket sporting a jagged rib and peered over half glasses. Gray wisps of hair framed his thin face. "Daniel Rockoff?" "Yes, sir. I didn't think you'd remember me." "Of course I remember you. You worked for me for 2 summers. "That was a long time ago. I must have been a freshman or sophomore in high school." The old man smiled. "You've filled out, but you're much the same." He glanced at Sinclair. "He was quite the conscientious young man. Never late, never complained." Sinclair grinned. "I've always said he was a Boy Scout." Mr. Tanner nodded. "How is your father, Daniel?" "He's well, sir." Mr. Tanner and his father had been friends for 30 years. His father had gotten Rockoff that long ago summer job. "I've not seen him in a while. This economy keeps menders like your father and I busy. Good for business, but not so good for friendships." Better to fix the old than buy new. How many times had he heard his father utter those words? "A notion that is again popular." He set down the jacket and rose, shifting his stance from side to side as if working out kinks. "What can I do for you?" Rockoff unclipped his cell phone from his belt. "I'd like you to look at a picture of a jacket." "Sure." Rockoff pulled up the picture. He'd been careful to snap just the jacket and not any part of the victim. "You know I'm with the Alexandria police." "I do indeed." He held out the phone to Mr. Tanner. "It's got your name on the label." He adjusted his glasses and leaned closer. "It was a custom piece, one of a kind. I worked on it for a month." "Who was it for?" "A young woman with dark hair." He held up his finger. "But I will have to look up the name. Just a moment. You will wait." "Of course." He replaced the phone back in its holster. The old man disappeared through a curtained doorway. Sinclair glanced around the shop and moved to a black leather jacket. "So you worked here?" "That's right. I delivered pieces to clients, picked up supplies, ran whatever errand Mr. Tanner needed." "I thought you worked for your father." "I did that as well." She touched a brown jacket's soft leather sleeve. "If I worked here, I'd be broke because I'd be buying all the stock. Gorgeous work." "Mr. Tanner's work is top of the line. A piece from him will last forever." She flipped over the price tag. "I don't think I can afford forever. The best I can do is the immediate future." "So it is with most." Mr. Tanner reappeared holding a white index card. "Her name is Diane Young, and she lives on Beauregard." He rattled off the address. "So what has happened to Ms. Young?" "It's not good." Mr. Tanner frowned. "I am sorry. I remember her now. She was a nice lady. She told me she read fortunes. She said I would live to be very old. I laughed and said I was very old." Rockoff wrote it down. "Thanks, Mr. Tanner." "Of course, Daniel. Tell your father I said hello." "I will." They moved back outside into the sunlight and each put on their sunglasses. "Do you think identifying the victim will be that easy?" He sat in his office watching the video on his computer, earplugs tucked in his ears. The monitor was faced away from the closed door, and he could easily minimize the image if someone entered unexpectedly. The picture was crystal clear, and when he watched the scene on his computer, he felt an almost intimate connection. The world around him faded away, and he imagined he could crawl inside the computer and relive the event. His hands around the witch's throat, he stared into her eyes. They'd been playing their game for several days, and with each passing day her fear grew, heightening a thrilling sense of power. But this last time he was not playing any longer. This time he was here to end their journey together and absorb the power of her magic. He pushed her head under the water and held tight as she kicked and grabbed at his wrists. A muscle twitched in his jaw as he held her down. Her pulse throbbed faster and faster under his palms. Soon the energy would leave her body and enter his own. He held so tight to her neck, the small bones of her throat snapped in his hands. Her feet kicked once, twice, and then her heart stopped. He closed his eyes, moaning as in a great rush the power hit him like a rough wave. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to the fresh tattoo on her forehead, savoring the surge that rippled his body with tension. He held tight to her limp body. His own arms and legs trembled as the flow of magic shot into him again and again until he could no longer endure it. Finally, he released her, relieved as if he'd just made love. He cupped the witch's lifeless face and then leaned forward and kissed her cold lips. Go in peace. He reached for a straight-edge razor on a table by the basin and held it up for inspection. The overhead light caught the edge of the blade, making it wink. He raised his t-shirt and then made a slow slice across his belly. The need to kill again was already strong. In years past, he could go months or even years between kills, but this time the urges had returned almost immediately. Why was his appetite so voracious? What in the universe so tempted him? He touched the still tender wound on his belly, pressing until the welcomed pain distracted him from the need. His heart raced, and a bead of sweat appeared on his forehead. The pain would keep him focused, keep him from killing too soon. He'd discovered this blade therapy by accident when he was young. He'd been battling the urge to kill in those days, still fearful of crossing the line from light to dark. He'd been watching a woman through her bedroom window, studying her and fighting the urge to kill. Someone, a neighbor he supposed, had spotted him and shouted. His heart racing, he'd run through the backyards toward the woods. He'd been disoriented and so frightened. In his haste to get to his car, he fell on his palms and landed against the sharp edge of a rock. When he raised his hands, he saw the blood made black by the moonlight. In the dark, as he'd stared at the blood, he'd felt sudden relief from the need. The pain rolled through his hands up his arms. It wrapped him in a tender embrace that blocked out all worries and fears. As long as the pain of the wound had lasted, he'd been able to resist the kill. He dug his thumb deeper into the wound. Pain pulsed from the long, thin gash. He managed a smile and a deep, cleansing breath. The cell phone in his pocket vibrated and pulled him back to the world of the living and the real. He fished out the phone and checked the message. He texted back a response. He rose, wincing joyfully as the wounded skin pinched and stretched. He grabbed his jacket and slid it on. Most did not understand the importance of his trade. Most did not know there were men like him who kept the world safe. But working anonymously was the secret to his success. As long as the world looked past him, he could continue to hunt. Chapter 5. Tuesday, October 19th, 11:01 a.m. Commonwealth Attorney Levi Kane was a well-dressed man. His suits were hand-tailored, as were his shirts. His gold cufflinks were Dior, and his shoes had a fine polish that always caught the light. He had never had the look of an overworked civil servant, but a man who saw the job as a stepping stone to the next level. He was out to make a name for himself. So when Charlotte's phone buzzed and Iris announced that Kane stood in the lobby, she wasn't totally surprised. She'd basically kicked his ass during the summations yesterday. Give me a minute and then escort him back. She raised her gaze from the doodles. She'd written Mariah and Sooner on her legal pad and circled both dozens of times. She tore the top sheet, crumpled it into a tight ball, and tossed it in a trash can. Rising, she pulled her jacket from the back of her door, checked her hair in the bathroom mirror, and touched up her lipstick. Calm, cool, reserved. Nothing can touch you. When Levi entered her office, she was smiling and waiting, hand extended. Mr. Kane, to what do I owe the honor of this visit? His grip was firm. I think you know why I'm here, Charlotte. Why don't you have a seat? She moved behind her desk, as if to suggest the question wasn't really a question at all, but a command. He checked his watch. Sure. She leaned back in her chair. So, how are your wife and children? Last you spoke about them, your wife was in nursing school and the girls were in elementary school. He set his briefcase beside his chair and smoothed his hand over his red tie. I'm always amazed how you keep tabs on everyone. It paid to know the competition. I like you, Levi. It's natural for me to ask. Thanks, and all three are good. My wife will graduate from school in December, and the girls love school. Maddie plays soccer, and Josie wants to be a ballerina. He pulled a photo from his wallet and showed it to her. My three angels. The three had very bright, eager smiles. The littlest one had dark hair like her father and a gleam in her gaze much like Sooner. Sooner likely hadn't played soccer or taken dance lessons. Charlotte hesitated and then handed the photo back to Levi. Lovely. Carefully, he tucked the picture back in his wallet. Now that we've played nice, let's cut to the chase. You know why I'm here, the Samantha White trial. She folded her hands on her desk and willed all the distractions from her mind. What would you like to discuss? Your client is going to be convicted. It always amused her when someone told her what the future held. Really? The jury is going to come back with a murder-one conviction. I don't think so. Feigned smugness aside, she didn't know any more about the trial's outcome than Levi. Juries could be fickle. He crossed his leg over his knee and adjusted his cuff. I want to talk again about a plea deal. She'd hoped her summation yesterday might have prompted a deal. Let's hear it. Samantha killed her husband. No one is contesting that. The issue at hand is if the killing was cold-blooded murder or self-defense. I've read the files, and I know the woman suffered at her husband's hand. I'm not an unfeeling bastard when it comes to these things. Between you and me, I think his brutality drove her to desperation. But the fact is, no one can take the law into their own hands. What are you saying? I want to be generous. Second-degree murder. She does 15 years with credit for time served. Charlotte's laughter sounded genuine, and might have been if she weren't fighting for a woman's life. She wiped away a pretend tear. You know, Levi, I've already had a trying day, and I was just thinking how nice it would be to have a good laugh. And bless your heart, you have done just that. He arched a brow. It wasn't meant to be funny. Of course it was, she said, letting the humor drain from her gaze. In fact, I need to believe it was a joke. Otherwise, I might take it as an insult. Because no one in this town is naive enough to believe that I'm going to let my 29-year-old client, the mother of an 8- and 10-year-old, spend the next 15 years of her life in jail and miss every important moment of her children's lives. I'm sorry for those children. I really am. But she killed her husband. In self-defense. Stan White was a brutal man who systematically abused his wife the entire 10 years they were married. When he tried to murder her in cold blood, she defended herself, and he died as a result. She does not deserve to serve one more day behind bars. She deserves to be with her children, and judging by the jury's faces yesterday, she won't go to jail. She will be acquitted. He sat back in his chair, his expression curious and probing. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Defending a nobody? I've seen some of the clients you've handled. Big bucks, big money. Why did you ride in on your white horse to defend this woman? You are pissing away your valuable time on Samantha White. A nobody. The words rattled in her head. I appreciate your concern, Levi, but my time is my own to manage as I see fit. He leaned forward, a conspirator's smile on his lips. I'd hate to think of all the billable hours that went down the toilet on this case. I mean, an office this fancy has got to cost a fortune, and with less income coming in, well, I'm wondering how long you can hold on. As long as it takes. Again, your concern touches me so deeply, but I can promise you the firm is quite solid and prepared to back Ms. White even through an appeal. An appeal? You've got to be kidding. Samantha White is going to do jail time. No, she is not. Annoyance flashed in his eyes. I always figured you for a smart woman. Good for you. Underestimating me is always a mistake. He tugged at his shirt cuffs. Are you going to take the plea deal or not? The scrapper in her wanted to reach over the desk and smack him hard, but she'd learned that acting out led to unfortunate consequences. She smiled brightly and rose. Not. For a moment he did not rise, but studied her with narrowed eyes. So you're going to ride this out to a very bitter and disappointing end? I suppose you will be disappointed when you lose, won't you? She moved toward the door. Now, if you will excuse me, Levi, I've got work to do. He stood, his posture stiff with annoyance. You're making a mistake. Have a nice day, Levi. Voluntary manslaughter. 8 years with the possibility of parole in 5 years. She hesitated. He'd sweetened the pot, another indication he was worried. Next year was an election year, and he wanted the conviction on his record. You owe it to your client to tell her about this deal. 5 years is a hell of a better deal than life. 5 years would be painful, but it wasn't a lifetime, and she owed it to Samantha to tell her about the deal. I'll pass it on. Deal is on the table for 24 hours. He moved past her in quick strides. When she heard the front reception door close, she gripped the edge of her office door so tightly her knuckles ached. She wanted to slam the door over and over again until the wood splintered. Anger had been a constant in her life, and she'd long ago learned to control it. So she released her grip, carefully removed her jacket, and hung it on the back of her door. Angie appeared in her doorway. So what do you think that house call was all about? He's scared. He didn't sound scared. He was. I could smell it on him. He's offered a plea. Manslaughter. 8 years with the possibility of parole in 5 years. Damn, that's a long way from life to murder 1. You want to tell Samantha, or do you want me to? I'll do it. She shook her head. He's not usually the kind to cave. If you plea, he has a conviction, and his record remains pristine. He's got ambitions, and that makes him predictable. Maybe. He said he felt sorry for Samantha. Do you really believe that? No. Rockoff and Sinclair had gone to Diane Young's apartment, but it was locked tight. There were no signs of forced entry or break-in, and neighbors had reported nothing out of the ordinary. She ran a business from her house, one neighbor had said, and it wasn't unusual for her to go days at a time without being seen. Without a search warrant, they'd have to wait to enter the apartment. None of the neighbors had pictures of Diane, so he'd contacted the Department of Motor Vehicles and requested a picture of her driver's license. The contact at the Department of Motor Vehicles had complained the computers were again down, but promised an image by end of business. Now, as the day wound to a close for the 9-to-5ers, Rockoff cut down a side street toward the medical examiner's office. Jennifer Sinclair reached for a power bar in her purse and ripped open the wrapper. How can you eat that? Rockoff said. She glanced at the bar as if searching for a problem. What? I'm hungry. He shook his head. Do you ever sit and eat a meal? I'm sitting now. At a table. Hey, I've conquered half the battle. She bit into the bar. I'm talking about eating at a table with chairs and a hot meal. Please, I'm single. I eat in front of the computer, on the fly, or if I'm lucky, with the television. You never sat down with your family to share a meal? Good Lord, no. Dad and I always ate in front of the television. Television was our version of family interaction. What about discussions on politics or family matters? Her eyes sparkled with amusement. I know you got the old country thing going with your family, but that's not the way with Clan Sinclair. Dad and I were the masters of avoiding any deep conversation. I'd venture to say if not for the television, World War III might have erupted in our home between me and my dad. Shameful. Did you and your ex sit at the table? He frowned. Sometimes, but she was on the go with her job, so we rarely were in the same city together. She peeled away more of the bar's wrapper. Was it her job that broke you two up? He shot her a glance. Kinda personal, don't you think, Sinclair? She shrugged. Hey, we've been partners over a year, and you've never mentioned her. He tapped his left hand on the steering wheel. The tan lines of his wedding band had finally faded. It had taken longer because he'd refused to remove the ring until the divorce was final. She wanted to live in California. She loved her work, and she did not want children. We both realized we wanted very different things out of life. No room for compromise? He shrugged, wondering how they'd ended up on this line of conversation. Partners shared more with each other than their own families, but he had never discussed his divorce with anyone. Not for her. Do you miss her? The question caught him short, and for a moment he thought carefully about the question. No. She nodded her approval. So, now that you're officially single, have you been out there tripping the light fantastic? Not much time, he said. You still living with your grandmother? The teasing edge added bite to the words. He felt no need to apologize. I have my own place. I've been with my grandmother the last couple of weeks because my sister, Anna, is out of town. Anna has lived with grandmother since her fall. She shifted in the seat toward him. It's touching, the way you all look out for her, but isn't it weird living with your grandmother? I usually stay with her one night, Sinclair, so Anna can get a break. But for the record, if my grandmother needed me more, I'd be there. She took care of me when I was little, and my parents worked 18-hour days. Now it's my turn. You're a good guy, Danny boy. Some chick, maybe someone like Charlotte Wellington, is gonna snap you up. She frowned and pretended to think. Of course, Ms. Wellington has got high maintenance written all over her. Charlotte wasn't like his ex. On the surface, there were similarities, but under the glitz, there was more to Charlotte. Sinclair, you care way too much for my private life. I'm living vicariously through you, Danny boy. My love life is a wasteland. Plus, I like to watch you get revved up when I mention her name. Charlotte, Charlotte, Charlotte. Amusing. He drove down the parkway and soon pulled up in front of the regional medical examiner's office. Do you remember that woman who was talking to Charlotte Wellington? Tall, olive skin, dark hair? Yeah, it strike you as odd that Wellington would be representing her? She's doing the pro bono thing more, I hear. No, her partner is. She's only committed to the Samantha White case. So she's doing another case. What's the diff? Wellington tensed up when the girl started talking to her. She looked almost sad. Maybe she feels sorry for the girl. It's more than that. How so? Don't know yet. He parked the car and turned off the ignition. I called in to the clerk of the court and got the girl's name. Sooner Tate, 18. Arrest report said she works for the carnival. Really? Got charged with shoplifting. So how did she hook up with Wellington? That's the mystery. The clerk said Charlotte just appeared and told the judge she was counsel for the defense. And why do you care? He shook his head. Good question. You just got out of a marriage with Ms. Career. Now you're sniffing around another. Doing no such thing. Annoyance snapping, Rockoff grabbed his notebook and got out. His partner had a knack for finding the right nerve and twisting. Good, because the image of you two cuddling over wine? She pretended to shudder. Twilight Zone. We haven't been on a date. Technically true. Good, because, dude, good working men and princesses don't last. You're getting to be a pain, Sinclair. She grinned. I do try. He opened the front door of the medical examiner's office for her, and she walked past. Diane Young bills herself as a fortune teller. You believe in fortune tellers? She barked a laugh. No and hell no. Tell me you don't. My grandmother is considered a seer. Many in the Russian community come to see her for advice. Ever occur to you that she's just an experienced older woman with good common sense? She told my cousin last year she'd have 2 boys before the year ended. We all laughed because Sue said she never wanted kids. She gave birth to twin boys last week. They walked up to the front desk, showed their badges, and signed the visitor's log. Rockoff led the way to the elevators and punched the down button. I've met Sue. She talks tough, but is a marshmallow when it comes to babies. Grandmother said my brother would injure his leg when he went to college. He broke it in 3 places. He was a soccer player, a forward center if I remember, not a stretch. She said you will be married by this time next year. Oh, she did? Sinclair planted her hands on her hips. So she tell you anything else about my Prince Charming? No. Too bad. Sinclair folded her arms over her chest. She's got good instincts, not special powers. We'll see. The doors opened. Time to go to work, Sinclair. They moved down the tiled hallway toward the double set of metal doors. The air had grown thicker with the scent of bleach and cleaners as they traveled deeper down the hallway. Above, a fluorescent light buzzed. Dr. Henson said she'd start the autopsy by 5, Rockoff said. Sinclair checked her watch, which is right about now. Rockoff pushed through the door, and they found Dr. Henson standing beside the stainless steel gurney, which held the sheet-draped body of their victim. Henson's red hair was tucked up in a surgical cap as green as the gown, which covered scrubs, and she wore gloves and booties over her feet. On the other side of the gurney was her similarly garbed, though short and heavier, assistant. The gurney was situated over a drain and pushed close to a sink. The tiled back wall sported a stainless work counter outfitted with a gruesome collection of saws and other instruments. Henson pulled back the sheet covering the victim. "Just in time, detectives. Suit up and we can have a look at your victim." The detectives donned gowns and gloves and moved toward the table. Both stiffened just a little as Henson dragged the sheet from the victim's naked body. Suspended from the ceiling was a microphone, which Dr. Henson could control with a pedal under the examine table. The doctor pressed the button with her foot and said in a clear voice, "It's October 19th, 5 p.m., and I have in attendance Detectives Jennifer Sinclair and Daniel Rockoff with the Alexandria Police Department, and my assistant, Nancy Farmer. I have rolled the victim's prints and submitted them to forensics, and we are waiting for an identification." "We might have a possible on her identity," Rockoff said. "I'm waiting on a picture from the Department of Motor Vehicles." Dr. Henson reviewed the victim's stats for the tape recorder as she moved up to the head of the table. "There is trauma to her hands and feet, all caused by wooden stakes being driven through her extremities. Judging by the wounds, I'd say those assaults were done post-mortem." "What about the tattoo on her head?" Rockoff said. "It's fresh. There's slight bruising around the letters, which tells me she was alive when this was done. The letters are in a crude block style." She pulled a ruler from the exam tray. "And measure 1.5 inches in height. The letters stretch the full length of her forehead." Rockoff drew in a breath as he stared at the dead woman's pale, sunken face. The skin on the face was particularly thin, so receiving a tattoo would have been painful. Judging by the thickness of the letters and the careful lines, he guessed the act took several hours. "What about cause of death?" Dr. Henson shook her head. "No gun or knife wounds. Bruising around the throat, but her windpipe is not crushed. There is water in her lungs. I'll know better when I open her up and run blood tests." And so they stood, watching the doctor complete a thorough external examination. She noted scars, bruises, other tattoos, moles, and any bit of information that could catch a killer. No telling what piece of evidence would be the one that would eventually catch the killer, so it all had to be collected and noted. Henson studied the victim's hand and then, using a clipper, snapped off bits of nails painted hot pink. She studied the nails under a microscope. "We might have a little DNA, folks. Looks like she might have scratched him." Rockoff watched as she bagged the clippings. "Great. You think you can rush through the results?" "Backlog is high now, but I'm sure I can make a compelling argument. Still, it will be at least a week." "As soon as you have DNA, I'll run it through the Combined DNA Index System." The Combined DNA Index System was a national database containing DNA profiles from unsolved crimes, missing persons, and the convicted. "The killer is so careful and practiced, I'll bet money this is not his first time." Once the evidence had been tagged, the doctor continued with her external exam. Only when she'd inspected the body fully did she reach for her scalpel and make the Y incision on the victim's chest. Though stoic, Rockoff reminded himself that the body on the table no longer carried the soul or life of the woman. She felt nothing. She was beyond this world. And her body was no more than evidence that would help him catch her killer. And yet, as the sharp tip of the blade breached the skin, he could not quite quell the anger and sense of violation. The killer had violated and terrorized her, and now it felt like they were doing the same. Dr. Henson reported that the victim's heart, lungs, liver, and other vital organs all were a healthy weight. When she opened the lungs, she said, "It looks like she drowned." "Drowned?" "There is water here, but blood tests will give me a better idea." "Drowning has got to be one of the worst ways to die," Sinclair whispered. "I nearly drowned as a kid, and I'll never forget the sensation." Rockoff glanced at his partner, and for the first time she looked upset. However, a tender word would be met with scorn, so he ignored the comment. "She was drowned in one location, brought to the abandoned restaurant, and staked to the ground." Rockoff made notes in his book. Dr. Henson continued her autopsy with a vaginal examination. For this, Rockoff did drop his gaze and waited to hear the doctor confirm what he already suspected. "She was sexually assaulted," Dr. Henson said. Sinclair muttered an oath. "Any semen?" "No, he was careful to use a condom. I would suggest that, based on the damage, he raped her several times." A heavy silence filled the room as she finished taking swabs and then covered up the lower half of the body. When Henson pronounced the autopsy complete, the detectives moved toward the door. They pulled off their scrubs, dumped them in a laundry bin, and moved into the hallway. Sinclair pressed fingers to her temples. "He's gonna do it again." "What makes you say that?" "He went after her like he was on some damn holy mission, and fanatics on a mission don't stop at one." Rockoff often played devil's advocate. "A bad breakup or divorce, emotions run hot." "Hot? Shit. This goes beyond regular anger and frustration. This is crazy guy behavior." "No argument." Rockoff's cell buzzed. He removed it from the holster and checked the caller's identity. "It's Keir." Detective Malcolm Keir was partnered with the senior member in the unit, Deacon Garrison. Keir hailed from the southern part of the state, and last year had married Angie Carlson, Wellington's associate. Rockoff opened his phone. "Rockoff. I got your Department of Motor Vehicles picture. Where are you?" "Medical examiner's office." "I'll send it to your phone." "Thanks. The magistrate says if the photo matches this victim, you'll have your search warrant right away." "Good." His phone beeped. The image of Diane Young's driver's license photo appeared on the screen. He held the Department of Motor Vehicles photo next to the victim on Dr. Henson's table. Dark eyebrows, round face, full lips. It was a match. Rockoff raised the phone to his ear. "Tell the magistrate the photo is a perfect match." "I'll get the warrant," Keir said. He checked his watch. "It's past 7, so the traffic should be gone. I want to search your place tonight. The sooner we catch this nut, the better." Chapter 6. Tuesday, October 19th, 7:30 p.m. The detectives arrived at Diane Young's house just after 10 p.m. Forensic technicians were backlogged at another crime scene, but had said they'd follow within the next half hour. Diane Young lived on the top floor of a 3-story brick apartment complex in New Market Apartments off Beauregard Street. The 300-plus unit complex was constructed mostly of brick and had plenty of grass and well-established trees for shade. Located on the border of the city of Alexandria and Arlington County, it had been built in the late 70s and was considered nice and affordable. A single light illuminated the top level and the metal doors that led to the 4 different units. Each of the doors had either a wreath or a welcome sign, including Diane Young's, which sported a piece of stained glass artwork fashioned into a half-moon. Rockoff pulled on his rubber gloves, and then, using the master key from the complex manager, he opened the front door. He flipped on the light just inside the front door. He glanced inside the apartment, taking note of parquet floors that led to a galley kitchen and then to a dining room. An 11 by 14 painting featuring the sun and the moon hung on the wall just inside the small foyer, and below it a small table sported a basket and a cell phone charger. No doubt, like him, Diane put her keys in the basket and her phone on the charger in the same place every time when she returned home. "She's got a thing for the sun and moon," Sinclair said. Rockoff nodded. Records show that she owned a business called Beyond. Apparently she reads horoscopes and tarot cards for internet customers. Sinclair flipped on the lights in the kitchen. A pot rack filled with copper pans dangled from the ceiling, and a rich maple dinette set filled the corner nook. "Looks like business might have been good." According to the city business license department, she made 6 figures last year, and the business owns 3 top-of-the-line computers, a scanner, and printer. Moving through the kitchen into the dining room, they noted the furniture was made of a rich, fine-grained wood. A china cabinet was stocked with fine crystal and china. More paintings on the walls featured the sun and moon theme. They rounded a small corner and into the living room filled with a brown leather sofa, 2 club chairs, a coffee table, and a widescreen television. An oval oriental rug pulled the space together. The magazines on the coffee table were neatly stacked. Rockoff picked up a copy of a fashion magazine. Diane had dog-eared the pages of the articles she wanted to read. Not surprisingly, she'd made notes in the margins on the horoscope page. "JV, wrong, too general. Looks like she didn't have much use for the monthly horoscope column." Sinclair picked up another magazine. "She's done the same here. I guess she was always tracking the competition." Other than Diane's notes in the magazines, the place was eerily put together. Not a pillow was out of place or a picture askew. She liked things neat. Sinclair picked up a picture of Diane and another woman who shared her blue eyes and black hair. "Think this is her sister?" Rockoff glanced at the photo. Good bet. I've got an officer trying to track down next of kin. Walking through a victim's home always left Rockoff feeling like the interloper. A week ago, Diane had been alive and well and sitting on this couch, watching television, eating a snack, and marking up her magazines. Now she lay in the morgue, a Y incision on her chest, waiting for next of kin to claim her.